Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen, or good morning or good evening, depending on where you are in the world at the moment. And welcome to this question and answer webinar on the Luz Living project. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, I normally allow a few minutes, normally 2 or 3, just after the scheduled start time, because there are some people that sometimes attend a little bit late. But I will try to cover just briefly in a minute or so some of the housekeeping. So the format of this webinar is very different to most of those that we do. This is really intended to be a question and answer. So we have taken a range of questions. We've tried to actually cover them all, but there was a last minute flurry of people sending out some information today, and unfortunately there was just no time to review those and incorporate them. So if any question has been missed, either we missed them or we didn't get time to get to them, then please, after the event, feel free to be in touch with us. The procedure will be that I have actually set out a little structure, which I'll cover in a second, and where I've grouped the questions that had been asked or sent in into sort of 8 categories, and those are the categories I'll be following. So I will answer all those questions first, and then I will come back to any questions that you might wish to put up on the chat or on the Q&A. And if there's time, I'll be happy to go and attempt to answer those questions as well. So that's more or less the sort of interaction that is likely to happen from your side to me, and then I will respond in kind with information about the project. I haven't introduced myself because I was waiting a few minutes, but my name is Luis da Silva. So I'm one of the directors of Quality Living Algarve Limitada, which is the holding company for the Luz Living project. But we use the two names intermittently because clearly the brand is Luz Living, and it's a company that only owns that single asset. So its focus is on delivering the Luz Living project, and therefore we often use Luz Living as the way of identifying ourselves. Some of you may know that I'm involved with several other Portuguese-related ventures in terms of assisting people in the move to the retirement to or the investment in Portugal. And so during this presentation, at some point, I will also try to provide you, if you have inadvertently requested information about Luz Living, but it's not quite for you or something different, then to identify whether and how we can help you. But again, to emphasize, the focus today is on Luz Living, and the 3 other categories of inquiries we often get via Luz Living are people who want to make an imminent or immediate move to Portugal, typically under the D7 visa, and I will explain how the D7 becomes important in the context of Luz Living as an investment for any of you who are considering an investment in the project. Some people inquire about Luz Living actually wanting to find a finder, so a property finder, someone to help them find properties, not only to look at Luz Living, but other things. And then we have a subgroup of people that are interested in the golden visa, and they often approach us thinking that this may be a golden visa project, and perhaps not fully understand the golden visa rules. So I will also explain some of the golden visa things in answer to some questions which we've received. And the question specifically was, how has or how will the war in the Ukraine affect the Portuguese real estate market? And it seems almost crass, in a sense, to respond to that question, but respond to it we must, because we must address some of these issues head on. And I think there is no shame in saying that one of the reasons that people ask the question and they inquire about Portugal is because consistently it features as the world's 3rd or 4th safest country. And therefore, the answer to that question partly is that although, of course, there has been an effect from reduced Russian and Ukrainian investment, which last year totaled somewhere in the region of 4 million and 30 million euros, respectively, in the real estate market. The Portugal is still seen as a very, very safe haven, and particularly in difficult times such as these, that contrast becomes even more evident, and so even more relevant for those looking for a safe destination and also looking for a safe investment, dare I say it. So again, please bear with me. My hesitation is really because I am conflicted about making commercial points at a time of such difficulty. But you know, we have an outstanding project here, and I'm sure that you will understand why it offers some of these solutions, not only in terms of safety and security, but also in terms of versatility, which is exactly, I think, going forward what the world requires and is looking for. And so, generally speaking, the factors in the perception of the country, Portugal as a safe, neutral country, means that demand is expected to continue to increase. It has been increasing. I will answer some more questions about that in a second. But in response to the question of the situation we live at the moment globally and in terms of Europe, we do not expect that, broadly speaking, to affect the demand for real estate in Portugal. You know, unless something even more dramatic happens, which we sincerely hope it does not. I also need to start here with a disclaimer, and that in our attempt to answer a lot of the questions, some of them border on the legal, the financial, and so on. And please take this as the comment of a developer, and this is not intended to be advice of a financial or legal nature, nor are we offering any sort of security or anything similar. We're responding as a developer, and if at any point or after the presentation you feel that one or more of the points that we have made you need to validate, whether from a fiscal, a financial, a tax, or an accounting perspective, please do so with duly regulated independent professionals. And if you need to do something on a multi-jurisdictional basis, then feel free to ask us. We work with a whole panel and range of lawyers, accountants, tax experts, and so on, and we're happy to make referrals to those people so that you can seek independent advice about that. So now on to the questions, and I have broken up the questions into, broadly speaking, 8 categories. I'm assuming you can all see the agenda slide that has popped up showing 8 points. And I will cover off initially some general questions which we received, which are relevant and worth responding to. Some questions about the Portuguese real estate market, real estate ownership and associated costs, then real estate and residency, okay? And then we have the 4 final sections, which are about the Luz Living project itself, so the design and features, the prices. In some cases, some publicity has gone out without price. I'm not quite sure why, but we want people to understand how much these things cost, these apartments cost. The Luz Living purchase plans and payment terms, financing options, and timing of all this. And then a section on which I will actually spend quite a lot of time in the context of all the questions, because we've had the majority of questions around rentals and returns. And I will try to answer those in as much detail as is practical with some practical examples. So I'd just like to emphasize, I'm not intending to do a presentation. I will leave a slide up and I will talk to the questions and to the answers. And I have prepared just a half a dozen or so slides that help me maybe exemplify some of the answers and make them a little bit clearer to all of you. First question about the Portuguese real estate market: have prices increased or decreased, and will they increase or decrease? So essentially, there have been price increases continually from the second half of 2014, even during the pandemic. 2021 was the best year for real estate on record. So just to give you a context, prices continue to go up, and there is no indication that they, for whatever reason, would tend to come down. And the projections from everyone with whom we talk both at the individual real estate listing level, aggregator portals, people who do statistics on this, is that they expect prices to continue to increase. Now, some people may argue that, this is not the case, but I'm just conveying to you as an audience what the general sentiment is. Second question, does supply exceed demand or the opposite? Well, here I always like to use the example of Spain, where there is often excess inventory simply because the Spanish market puts out a lot more inventory than the Portuguese market. But contrary to Spain, or unlike Spain, Portugal faces a shortage of supply. A number of aggregator sites have shown inventory to be down 10% on average, and remember that some areas are much more popular than others, so they would contribute disproportionately to this. So on average across the market, 10% down in terms of inventory and availability, and some agents are reporting the average number of listings down by 40%. That's 40%. So they may have had historically 1,000 listings, and today they have on average 600 listings, just to give you a very simple example. The new build premium is substantial, and this is directly relevant to Luz Living because, as you will know, this is an off-plan project. We're clearing the site as we speak, but it's a new build. We will build from scratch. It's a new building, and the reason there is a premium, and a substantial one at that, between new build and, let's say, resale or existing inventory is down to a range of factors. The one is, of course, the primary one is the use of much better materials that help with acoustics, insulation, and so on. So the quality of the materials, for those of you who know the Portuguese market, and the Spanish is similar, over years, the quality has increased, and that has meant that, more expensive, but also much better material is being used in the finishes of new build property. But of course, you're all very aware of the fact that, and this is even before this crisis, that construction costs and labor costs, so material costs, raw material, steel, cement, and so on, as well as labor costs, have shown a tendency to increase. And 2022 has been 2021 and 22 have been brutal in that sense. There's been a huge increase in costs, which has meant that many projects have come under pressure because specifically because of that. And so it's important to note that the combination of different factors means that the costs of these types of projects have a tendency only to go up, and then we're looking effectively at scope creep of costs. And I will talk a little bit about that because we've had some questions about to what extent these costs are actually fixed or not for you as buyers, and I will talk to that point as well. But I just wanted to cover the general panorama of the market. So those were a couple of questions about the Portuguese real estate market. The next sector is around real estate ownership costs, etc. Now, first question is, do you need to be a resident or citizen of Portugal to buy in Luz Living? And I've expanded that question to or anywhere else. And the simple answer is no. The ownership of real estate and real assets in Portugal is free to anyone, as long as they can, obviously pay for it and prove that they are, prove the source of money, and so on. The normal checks that you would expect, but there is no limitation on the purchase of real estate. Next question: does being a foreign national present any challenges to ownership of property in Portugal? The answer here is no. Property ownership is protected by law. Lawyers verify that the title is clear and unencumbered before any transfer takes place, and that the registration is publicly available. There's a public register, and that means that pretty much anyone can access it and figure out what that property is, whose name it's in, you know, whether there are any charges on it and so on and so forth. So buying a property does not mean you need to be a resident or citizen, as we said before. These are separate processes. So residency and citizenship is not necessarily tied to real estate ownership. It may be, and we'll talk about that in the next sector or in the next section, but it does not need to be. So there's an unencumbered access to the market in terms of real estate purchasing, which is not linked to citizenship or residency. Many foreign buyers purchase a property, for example, as an investment or a holiday home, and then later use it as a residence, subject to obviously having the right to reside in Portugal. And I'll give an example here, which is very fresh in everyone's mind, and that is relating to anyone who comes from the UK. So as a UK citizen, clearly before the UK left the EU, there was the freedom of movement, and people had holiday homes and they could spend as much time as they wished in those homes. The minute that the UK left the EU, the rule of residency or permanence, should I say, forgive the incorrect term, the rule of permanence in the Schengen area, which is 90 days in every 180, starts to apply. And therefore, people who had second homes can no longer use those, you know, for extended periods unless they are resident in Portugal in this case. And so what this means is either people have to plan their trips in 90-day bits or chunks, or and this is a rolling criteria, or they use the property that they've already purchased, for example, in a holiday home, as the basis for the accommodation when they make an application for a residency visa. Okay. And I will not go into the questions of which properties can be backdated for golden visa and so on. This is a very complex theme. If anyone has a particularly complex matter in that aspect, then feel free to write to us, but that's outside the scope of this presentation. The next question was, can we see title of ownership before investing? Now, the general answer is, of course, yes, but I'm considering that this is a question done or made in the context of this project, and the answer is absolutely yes. For example, we provide evidence of that title and ownership by Quality Living Algarve, which is the company that owns Luz Living, to all the agents that market the property. So we are obliged to provide a pack of, let's call it, legal administrative information, and that is one of those bits of information. So absolutely, it's a public record, and if anyone, you know, has a doubt as to whether anyone's promoting a project and they don't own it, ask for that, and that can be easily provided. So the next question is, are there references of similar projects in Portugal or other countries? This is a really tough one, and I'm going to answer this in two parts. First, I'm going to talk about us, and then I'm going to talk about the market. So we as a developer, we are a new developer in this country. So the shareholders of this company are multinationals. They're multiple nationalities. And this is the first time they've come together, this particular group, to do a project in Portugal. The individual shareholders of the company have had diverse experience in terms of delivering real estate projects in different sectors in Portugal itself. The most relevant one probably is in the municipality of Sils by one of our shareholders and directors. Delivered projects in the UK, in Brazil, in the US, and done many investments. So these are experienced investors, shareholders. But the question then becomes is, what track record may there be in this particular sector? And in Portugal, and the answer is very little, and that's exactly why we're doing this. So the reason why there is perhaps not a track record is exactly the motivation which takes us and took us to invest in this. And I will spend maybe just a minute or so explaining the huge demand or the gap that there is in the market. So we have in many Southern European countries, and I'm going to talk about Portugal specifically, a very appealing, attractive set of circumstances for people who want to typically pre-retire and retire to the country. Many of you will be listening to this Q&A session from countries where this market is much more evolved. The US is a prime example, 50 plus years of independent living. Often you'll associate these with communities built around, the golf course communities and so on. Some of them may have some other amenities. There are even some high-rise, communities in big cities like Chicago, where you might have some floors of commercial, then some residential, and then in some floors even some care. So it's kind of a mixed use, it's sort of a CCRC going high. In Portugal, and specifically in the Algarve, which is the most in-demand, most popular area of the country for foreign nationals, there's hardly anything. We have one 30-year-old retirement community, which is quite remote, near Lorlaire. And then there is literally absolutely nothing that caters for a residential style of living in what is the country's most popular area. This makes no sense. So as businesses, we have for many years been grappling with the difficulty of lack of reliable inventory solutions, real places in which people need to live, because we have two big sources of demand. We have people arriving in the country who are accustomed to a certain community lifestyle in their own country because the retirement model is more evolved in that country. And then we have a group of local residents that are looking for something in the next phase. They may have bought, let's say, a lovely villa in the hills when they were 40. They're now 55 and thinking, well, maybe I want to be a bit closer to amenities and I want to find these solutions, but where do I look? Must I go and live in a touristic apartment, and every summer people are moving in and out and renting by the week and so on? So the dynamic of the market is such that there's a huge gap. But by virtue of that, it means that very few players have any contextual experience in delivering these projects because there are none. It's just as simple as that. So we ask you to bear this in mind. The reason that there is a lack of track record is precisely because the market to date has not demonstrated yet the appetite, and I could go on and on about this, but of course I won't in this presentation. The main players who are linked to, for example, the tourism market and so on, they have such a big revenue source in their own right that they haven't yet turned their attention to this segment of the market. And so there is a gap that we are trying to address, and we think it's a solution for people such as you attending this presentation, both from a residential and an investment perspective, which I'll explain. So the other point that I would make there in terms of mitigating risk, because clearly the question is asked in the context of understanding and doing due diligence, is that I'm talking now specifically about Luz Living, have structured the payment terms of this in such a way that it really mitigates the risk. And I will talk a little bit about the timing of the payment terms and so on. It really mitigates the risk for an investor or for a buyer, and really positions this type of project, Luz Living specifically, in stark contrast to, for example, many of the traditional golden visa investments, where all the investment has to be made up front, even if sometimes the work or the refurbishment work still needs to occur. So I will talk a little bit about those differences in my next section of the Q&A. Right, so those were some questions in that second sector. Then the next sector, or the next section, is about real estate and residency. Okay, now the real estate and residency section covers off the link between real estate in a rented or purchased form and residency requirements, so gaining access to, in this case, Portugal, for the benefit of residing in the country. Okay, so that's the section we'll be covering off that. First and most asked question in this section is, what changes have there been to the golden visa program in Portugal? Now, I do have I actually, on my presentation, I might even have a little map So there, the golden visa changes. Forget the text. I haven't checked the text on the right again for up-to-dateness, if I can use that term. So the map on the left are the golden visa changes which were implemented at the start of 2022. The gray areas, which are not that visible because the background is also sort of whitish gray, but they are most of these coastal areas and then a big chunk of the Algarve and then Coimbra. These are the high density areas. The red are low density areas within a high density municipality, and then the blue areas are low density municipalities. So anything that is blue or red continues to be eligible for residential, and I will explain this again in a second, residential real estate purchases that qualify for the golden visa. Okay, so that is important. Why? Because this question of the residential is one of the most important yet confused elements of the change of the law for most people. Residential real estate is defined, broadly speaking, as real estate that is not touristic and that is not commercial, right? And by touristic, it doesn't mean generally that you as a buyer or someone will interpret an apartment or a house as being appealing to a tourist market. No. There is a specific designation in Portugal, which is touristic, which has to do with licensing and often with financing from public funds of those projects, okay? And those projects come with certain rules. The most important rule, in effect, is that those projects are not intended to be lived in. So the properties within those projects are not intended to be lived in by people all year round. Why? Because the developer and operator of those projects, having benefited, let's say, from reduced tax benefits and so on, has to make available those properties to the tourism market for a substantial amount of time during the year, and a substantial amount of the total inventory has to be made available. Therefore, if you buy in a touristic project, you are by default limited generally to the usage of your own property, not only in terms of time, but also in terms of when, the period within which you can use that. Okay, so it's very important. I'll come back to that later on in terms of golden visa. It's very important in your own mind to decide whether you are a resident or future resident buyer or investor, or a pure investor that will not need or want to set foot in principle in their property, so minimum use. This is a criteria that is important. And if you are in the former category, Luz Living is an excellent option for you. In other words, if you intend to use it, require the flexibility and so on. If you are in the latter, pure, and you never intend to use it, perhaps it's not as good a residential solution, and it may be still a very good investment solution, but it's not a golden visa solution. And I will cover that specifically, but I've preempted myself and answered that question already. So it's not a good qualifying golden visa, or it's not a golden visa qualifying option at all. So if you're only looking for golden visa and you thought that Luz Living was that option, it's not. Talk to us about other options if that's the route to go, but please bear in mind this residential aspect, because just in the last 3 weeks we have had 3 clients approach us about golden visa properties, thinking that they wanted, a cheap and cheerful option, golden visa, but when drilling down, all 3 of them concluded that they actually wanted more of a hybrid, and so they couldn't go into the low-level golden visa because it didn't offer them that, and they all, without exception, opted for a residential option. And I won't go into the 3 processes, but just to show that you need to have someone who's experienced work through with you your thinking to make sure that you're actually defining and deciding on the right type of product for your short, medium, and long-term objectives for Portugal. The last thing that we want, and anyone wants, is you to be spending money unnecessarily on something which only meets the objectives for a couple of years, and then having to buy someone else, and then of course trying to exit another another investment. Okay, so residential real estate in high density areas no longer qualify for the Golden Visa program from January 2022. Touristic and commercial continue to be valid, and low density areas continue to qualify as before. Okay, they have the two levels with a 20% discount, which is 280 and 400,000. Again, I'm not here to discuss Golden Visa. If somebody wants to clarify that, they can clarify that offline with us, and we're happy to explain that, as we do to many people. When should I consider the Golden Visa as an investor? So we've had this question in the context of Luz Living. So let me give you a couple of hints, because they're important in terms of you taking a decision about whether Luz Living is a good fit for you or not. So if you want to spend as little time as possible on getting residency via the investment route, then we often tell people that they should go for the cheapest available option, 280,000, which is not available in high density areas. Okay, so if you want to spend as little money as possible in getting a Golden Visa, then doing that via a low entry level is one of the ways to doing that. Beware, we always say, of the guaranteed buyback schemes. No pejorative intent meant there. We just use schemes as a general word. But any projects that have a guaranteed buyback, unless they are guaranteed via an insurance, a contract, or a bank guarantee, they're worth nothing, is our view. Respectfully and humbly, but that's our view. If you cannot spend more than the requisite 7 days per year on average in Portugal, you are also a good candidate for the Golden Visa. Of course, this is assuming you want residency, and you foresee that situation continuing for several years. Okay, so if that circumstance is going to change in 2 years' time, for example, that's different. We'll deal that in another question, the next question along. And if you do not anticipate moving to or spending extended periods of time in Portugal. So if you are just looking for the residency, access to the market, Schengen and all that kind of, and in the future, perhaps even citizenship, but you're not really intending to spend time in country during that period, then the Golden Visa is a good fit. We should say that 95% of the people with whom we deal, with the exception of people from Asia, so anyone from Asia listening, you're probably on the, but that you are not of European origin, from Asian origin, then probably you are in the latter category, which is you don't really intend to spend much time, because a lot of the movement in the world happens north to south. So people in Asia are typically spending a retirement in a country in Asia, and unless they're European expats sort of looking to move back to Europe and so on. And only recently have we seen a migratory pattern between North America and Europe, greater than it was in the past, but still very much north to south in each of the time zones of the world, a topic of which I could go on for a long time, but I won't here. The next question, therefore, is when should I not consider the Golden Visa touristic real estate development? So again, I'm coming back to this thing and obviously trying to differentiate about why you would want to purchase in a place like Luz Living versus going the Golden Visa touristic development. So the first one is, if you consider living in Portugal in the future, typically within the next 2 to 3 years, you should really not be considering a touristic real estate development, because you will be highly limited in the use of your own property in general. There might be some exceptions. If you wish to spend time in your own property during peak or shoulder seasons, stay away from touristic investments, because that's exactly the time frame and the period during which those managers and those operators and those resorts or developments intend to have access to your property, and you will be banned unless paying a huge rate from staying in your own property. If you want better control and flexibility over rental income and costs, this is absolutely a huge point. Most of the managed income situations in sort of closed resorts, if sometimes with a guaranteed rental or whatever, they come with a lot of restrictions and quite high costs in terms of the management itself. So a lot of those profits are stripped out, and then you also have very little freedom of movement in terms of how to manage this. You can't use your own manager. You can't define how the rental scheme would work in the context of your own personal needs. So if flexibility and control over the rental, let's say, approach is important, or not having too limited approach, then something like Luz Living is a much better option than, for example, a touristic development. If you want to generally get a better value for money, or you want the property to be open market linked and not necessarily golden visa threshold linked. So all of you will know that there was this big story about the 500,000 in Lisbon. Suddenly all 2-bedroom apartments in Lisbon became worth 500,000 because that was the initial golden visa threshold. So to avoid that sort of temptation that sellers may have, it's actually normally better to work with a development that is priced according to the market and that is selling in the open market without necessarily relying too heavily on the golden visa. And that is important in terms of resaleability, because you've meant that you've bought in an open market way, you will sell in an open market way. You won't have to necessarily support an inflated or adjusted upwards price of a property that may not be worth exactly the golden visa threshold. So that's important. And the other thing is, if you want to exit after 5 years, slightly linked to my previous point, and you want to guarantee that you want to exit while not losing money, you want to make sure that you haven't paid a premium just, for example, for a golden visa, unless, of course, that isn't of any worry to you. But if you're looking at exiting, then please look at the exit mechanisms. And we always say, of course, the real estate market can go up as much as it goes down, but generally allowing the market to freely regulate itself is better, because you will be able to better benefit from those increases. And again, in terms of Luz Living, we're talking about new build product, which is very much in demand, prime location, you know, and we have no doubt whatsoever that there will be something we didn't talk at all about after the 2008 and 2009 crisis, but we are talking about it again. We really believe very strongly that there will be capital appreciation in this, you know, in this product, given the combination of factors involved in it. So those are the general questions which we received to date, and hopefully that's been of some help in terms of understanding the context within which Luz Living exists as a project, both in terms of the market, purchasing, and so on. Now I'd like to move on to the project itself and answering questions about the project. So the first is the section on, let me just go back to the presentation so that everyone's looking at it. So we've covered the first 4 points. I'm now moving to point 5, which is Luz Living design and features. Okay. And I'm going to, and there are sort of half dozen or so questions in this section. The first is, what type of project is Luz Living? And I think that the reason the person asked this question is because sometimes there is a confusion, I think that's the right word, from some people who, we've even been asked by some people, is this a care home? You know, or you know, where are the medical facilities and so on? And I think it's important to note that not all markets have an understanding of the pre-retirement and retirement living sort of sector. So those of you who come from the US, and I'll use you again, if I may, as an example, or even from Canada, South Africa, Australia are 2 other sort of very advanced markets. You understand already the difference between independent living, assisted living, and care. You know, these are solutions which are totally different, but they're on a continuum. You know, as we're younger and independent, we want to prepare for, let's call it, later life, but we don't want to be in any sort of constrained environment or feeling that we're, you know, being treated as if we're, you know, have limitations. That doesn't mean that we don't design for the future and for the fact that we all get sore knees and you know, you know, hips that don't work as well, and we may sort of, you know, our eyesight fails even more than it does at the moment. So all these things happen to all of us, but Luz Living is an independent living project. It's literally, you could buy an apartment somewhere without all the amenities that Luz Living has, and it would be in the same category, shall we say, in terms of the type of living. So there is no talk here of it being a care home or anything else. However, as people age, and that's what we want people to do, want people to be able to age with their purchase. So if they reside here, we don't want them to have to be turned away or turfed out in 10 years' time when they find that they can't handle 3 flights of stairs because they bought a beautiful sea view 3rd floor apartment that requires 108 steps to get to, and they can't deal with that. They suddenly have to give up their home because they can't get access to it. So the basic things which we consider fairly basic, but we still have to sell, as it were, as advantages into the market, because the market, as I explained earlier, is relatively unsophisticated in preparing product in the right way for us, all of us, as we age. Okay, and I only use a simple example in Portugal, and that is, and it applies to Spain as well, and that is that to make the most of sea views, we often build houses that are townhouses over 2 or 3 floors. Well, those are lovely for the sea views, but you get to 75 or 70 or 65, depending on how you're doing in terms of your health, and you try and climb and get your, those lovely sea views from your roof terrace. Well, you never see the sea because you never go up there. In fact, you probably, if you left your dish antenna there on the roof and you haven't seen it for 10 years, that sort of scenario. So what we're trying to do here is build for the future, make it flexible, accessible, but it's independent living. Most of the people that are reserved so far, and most of the people that talk to us, and I know that I won't mention them by name, but I know that a couple that are, I think Carol is on the call. I mean, this couple is super active. They travel extensively. They have a variety of cultural interests. They've got family back home. They're traveling here, and so this is the profile of the type of person that typically is interested in this solution. A very international, dynamic, active individual or couple, and they tend to enjoy socialization. So it's very much about the community living, but it's independent living. Okay. What amenities will be included on the site? Now, I'm going to try something I haven't done before, but rather than listening to me babble on, with just a screen in front of you, I'm going to do a different share, and I'm going to actually share with you the virtual tour. So if there's one thing that I'd like you all to do after this presentation, if you haven't done so already, if you go to our website, www.luz, L-U-Z or Z, living.com. If you go to that website, on the first page with lovely music, but you might have to turn the sound down as I have done here, there's a virtual tour, which is what you're looking at here. Okay. And if you go into that, oops, I thought I turned the, so I'm just going to mute that because it can get a bit loud and I don't like people speaking over me. So this is the reception of Luz Living. And there's no better way to get a sense, if you're not in the country and haven't visited the region, no way to get a better sense of what it will look like than actually doing this. The way that this has been constructed at great cost, I should add, is overlaying the architectural drawings with the materials. These are the actual materials that will be used, and so on and so forth, with the topographical and other information that we have. So if you look northwards from Luz Living, that is what you will see. Hopefully my computer sometimes is a bit shaky because of the drivers, but hopefully there's not too much shakiness going on here. You look northwards and you see the sort of green, or if they in the dry season, they'll be brown hills behind. And that's area that cannot be built upon at the moment. It's unlikely to be built upon for the next 6 to 10 years approximately. And then the master plan will be redefined. Who knows what will happen then? It'll depend on demand, but that's the sort of thing that you see. And if you go into this, I'm going to just pop into 3 locations here, so you can get a sense of what this is like better than me just talking through it. So if you go into the garden and pool area, so it will have the largest private condominium garden in the town or village of Praia da Luz. You can see the large pool. I'm not going to jump around. There will be a dedicated pet area in that sort of corner there where my cursor is pointing. And this is more or less a sense. I'm trying to go not too quickly. So we have some treatment rooms and spa over there. We have the indoor pool there, which I'll jump to in a second. We have a gymnasium there. There will be an owner's lounge. So for COVID, for example, if there's a new variant, I mean, I just found this fantastic that we'd actually catered for this, although we didn't specifically design for it, but Luz Living works out really, really well in this sense. So you have the outside lounge area, which is accessible for residents, of course, owners, tenants, whoever, but you're outside. So if you have a concern about the proximity to your neighbor or whatever, you don't want to invite them necessarily to your apartment, here is your area. It's yours as a resident to use. And these big doors that slide mean that you can either be inside the lounge, which I'll jump into very, very quickly. Sorry, that's just loading up and looking towards the door. So not promising that it's going to be exactly laid out like this, but if we can have a piano and somebody plays, we will put it in there, no problem whatsoever. So we will have a lounge, and you can see there are certain groupings of the furniture, which means that people who may be in the same bubble together, you know, two neighbors that know each other particularly well, don't want to meet in their own apartment, can come down here and they can sit either inside or outside. Now, clearly, you're not going to be able to jump through this wall, but for ease of observation, we've allowed a jump through a fictitious wall here. Well, there would be a real wall, but a fictitious jump. And you can see there will be a gymnasium with a very appealing outlook. So we want people to be able to remain fit and healthy. And we have at significant cost, and when I say significant cost, I don't mean it's just the cost of building it, but the number of apartments that we've had to sacrifice in order to get this in. But we've wanted to make sure that we actually have an internal pool which people can use to actually swim in. You know, this is not just a paddle pool, it's a pool where you can actually swim lengths. So in the winter, where the outside pool is not warm, you know, you can use the indoor pool, and that, you know, and we can control that in terms of booking swimming sessions, make sure that then the team that's on the ground clean and disinfect the access points. So it is possible to control the security, and I mean security, I mean health and safety security of the condominium, while providing all the amenities and the opportunities for socialization. And that is pretty unique. There are very few condominiums that allow that, and none that we know of that do this in the residential context. So I'll explain this in some of the questions a bit later on. So in the residential context, there are none that we're aware of that would do this. So I'm going to run to reception very quickly because I want to show you, I don't know why it goes to this. I want to show you the layout because we've had some questions around the layout of the apartments, and I want to demonstrate or show you what you will look like. So I've jumped to the garden level where we have our 1-bedroom apartments, and they all have an outside terrace and a private outside garden in addition to the communal garden. You will see that they have plenty of light, open plan kitchen, so plenty of area to have the dining room table, kitchen, and so on and so forth. I'll jump quickly into the bathroom. So apologies, excuse me, for those of you who have gone into the virtual tour, but I felt that so many people were asking this question that I had to show this. So this will be the sort of style and finish of the bathroom, and the look back in. The shower is large. I'll just point downwards. You can see it's a walk-in shower. So again, fully accessible. Not that everyone needs it, but nonetheless it's there. And then if you walk into the, excuse me, going quickly, sometimes it's a bit jumpy, so forgive me if it feels a bit jumpy at your end. Going into the bedroom, so similar sort of outlook towards the garden. Built-in wardrobes, the usual things that you would expect. Okay, so that is just got to try and figure out how to jump back to reception actually here. Forgive me. I have to jump outside now. This is obviously a limitation of my knowledge of the virtual tour. I was expecting to be able to jump to reception. Maybe I can jump up to the 2-bedroom apartment. Sorry, I'm looking up. So you're seeing what I'm seeing at the moment, which is basically Just going to go via reception because I wouldn't be able to jump into the 2-bedroom anyway. But a number of people have asked us about the views and what sort of sea views are available. And again, I just should explain the context while I jump out to the terrace of the 2-bedroom on the top floor. I should explain the context of the Algarve. It is not as easy to find sea views from properties as one would imagine, given the fact that the entire region is on the coast. And for those of you who know Spain, the southern coasts of Spain, many of them have the mountains that come up fairly soon after the coast. So there's a kilometer or less between the coastline and the mountains. This is not the case in Portugal. The sort of hills that we have, or the low-lying mountains, are very, very far back, and therefore you don't have always much elevation. So this, which is a view from one of that happens to be the corner unit, but the other units, with the exception of the far western part of the view, would have similar views from the top floor. This is considered an excellent view by Algarve view standards. You would really only get a better view than this if you were really almost on the water itself, and we're only about a 6-minute walk from the beach, so we're very close. So the panorama that one sees when one's on the veranda of the top floor, and all the apartments have this view. So it's, you know, they're in a row, so they're all slightly to the left or slightly to the right, but they all have this view. Is you see what we call the Rocha Negra, which is this hill on top of which there's a golf course called Boa Vista, and then you look ahead, you can actually see the sand on the sea from the top floor. The sand on the beach from the top floor. And then some of the apartments will also have a slight view to the village. You have plenty of space on the terraces. These are what we would call our smaller terraces. They have about 17 square meters, so maybe 180 square foot or so, apologies, about 170 square foot, but plenty of space to put tables, chairs, and so on. And the style of the apartment, you can see, is modern. On the inside, it will have everything you require in terms of ventilation, acoustics, insulation. All this is prepared. So we get a lot of questions around to what extent will we have noise from neighbors, for example. Our answer is little, if none, and certainly much less than in most other apartments that you will find built, because the type of construction method that we are using, and I won't go into bore you with the details of the way that we are building in terms of insulation and so on, but these will be advanced solutions. We will be using as efficient heating solutions such as heat pumps and clearly solar energy. We will have electric charging points, a pre-installation of electric charging points in the garage for those who have electric vehicles. Such a huge issue in Portugal in terms of having an electric vehicles, nowhere to charge it, whether it be public or even private. You're having to build your own solution. So we will have thought of all these things and designed and built them into the solution. So that's a little bit, I thought it would be a bit more efficient to show you rather than just talking through that. So back to our presentation and back to the questions. The next question we had was, and hopefully you've got a sense of the amenities on site. There was a question, I'm not sure if we actually came up, if I put it on, but I did see it later, and that was what sort of services will be provided by the concierge service at reception. So our plan is to, without going into too much detail again here, but our plan is to actually have a permanent team made up of those people who need to provide the essential services on the site. So there'll be cleaning, be some gardening, and there'll be reception. Clearly not 24 hours, although we will, if people wish, perhaps when in, you know, security at night or something, but there really is no need. It's a very safe area. But built into the person who will be assisting at reception will be a range of concierge-like services. So any resident can approach that person and ask for assistance in, for example, booking a restaurant, suggestions on where they might go, liaising with local partners, organizing, and we've already even had a preliminary conversation with a local a grocery store, Batistas, in terms of delivery of groceries and so on. So all this, if you don't know, if you're a resident or if you're staying there and renting someone an apartment from an investor, then you can approach the reception, which will double as a concierge service, and will do this. And because there's a limited number of residents or apartments, 38 in total, we fully expect that this will be a value-added service. Most of it is built in. Clearly, we're not going to be paying for the restaurant meals and so on, but all the process of coordination, if it can be done by the person there, and if they can be of assistance in some way, even talking to sort of back office team to provide some assistance, then they will do so. That person or the people that will be there will also play a fundamental role in the rental management, which I'll explain a little bit later on in the project. So there will be a sort of central area of services that will be coordinated out of reception. So it will not just be someone sitting at the door and pressing a buzzer to let you in. That pretty much you can do with a code. There's not much added value there. It'll be added value services which will enhance the living experience of people who are living in Luz Living, or for those of you who are thinking of this as an investment, for your tenants. And this is hugely differentiating. As a huge differentiator in terms of being able to position, shall we say, the product at another level, shall we say, relative to the competitors, well, the inexistent competitors in the market, but clearly there's always other accommodation. So where is the site fully accessible was another question we got. Yes, you can go anywhere on the site without having to climb a stair. You can even use a wheelchair if for whatever reason you have an operation and you find yourself limited to a wheelchair, for example. You can access everything. There are elevators in each of the blocks. It looks like a contiguous building, actually. I'm not sure if I have just trying to see if I have. So there's a bit of a view from the other side. So it looks like a continuous building if you look at it once built, but it's actually comprised of 6 blocks. And in each of those blocks, we have an elevator that gives it a huge degree of privacy, because it means that in every floor where there are some at the end, on the eastern end, it's some of the sort of reception and so on. But on every floor where there are apartments, the maximum number of apartments that share an entrance to an elevator is 2 per floor. Okay, this is it's for those of you, if there are any Brazilians listening in, dois por andar would be something we would say in Brazil quite frequently, and that is a degree of exclusivity which can only obviously be bettered by having the elevator go privately into your own floor. So we have a high degree of privacy, and also health and safety, because it means that there are less people pressing buttons on that particular floor because no one else needs to go to that floor, which means that the risk of contamination, people pressing the button is lower. And this answer from me is very different to what I would have given perhaps 3 years ago, pre-pandemic. But this is the context within which we now all need to consider and live. So everything is fully accessible. There are the 6 elevators in the complex, and they will allow access without the need to climb any stairs everywhere, including the roof terrace, which is a communal roof terrace with phenomenal panoramic views, and those views can be enjoyed by everyone. We will be putting some lounges and so on there. Sorry, someone is actually trying to call me now. It's patching through from a US number, which I'm going to have to decline. So what type of construction is there? This was quite a technical question from someone. Is it block construction or frame? And I'm assuming the person meant light steel frame, so modern methods of build. This is steel reinforced concrete with brick infill, generally speaking, well insulated and with appropriate damp coursing at the garden and garage level. We do have a substantial amount of steel. In fact, to reduce the cost of the projects, we actually changed the cladding, so the bit that comes on the outside, which was going to be concrete but now is not, in order to reduce our use of steel, and also become, in a sense, more responsible and ecological in the use of that. But the traditional build in particular to ensure that the builds are more earthquake proof, is to use the steel reinforced concrete, because the concrete sticks to the steel, and that provides some degree of flexibility in case there's any sort of little tremors. And there are always thousands or hundreds, I don't know what the statistic is, of little tremors going on all over Portugal, because it is an earthquake zone, not like California is, but it is nonetheless an earthquake zone. What about energy efficiency, thermal and acoustic comfort was the next question. So this project will have an A+ energy rating with the use of solar, heat pumps, talked about that actually, electric car charging points. So there'll be solid insulation and ventilation to ensure low probability of damp. And for those of you who have investigated and researched the Portuguese market a little, you will know that one of the biggest complaints is of existing houses, buildings, construction, is the coldness of the house and the damp which sometimes arises. And this is because the houses often are poorly insulated. They then don't have enough ventilation. People are breathing inside, there's condensation, they're doing all that. These problems will not and should not exist at Luz Living, because of the type of technology we're using and the types of methods of build. And this cannot be overstated. I once had a very good friend of mine stay at one of our houses in the Algarve, and it had been unlived in for a few months. And we were so cold, both of us. We could not get the house warm enough initially. And it was double glazed as well. So the many of the houses, and that wasn't even a bad example. There are many houses in Portugal that are so poorly insulated that you really will suffer severely in the winter. And so it's not always sunshine, although in the Algarve it's often sunshine, but it does get nippy at the end of the day in the winter, and you need to make sure that apartments are suitably prepared for this sort of change in thermal difference. And that's important, because the thermal variation can be as much as 20 degrees, for example. I'm not saying on an average day it could be as much as 10 or 15, but there's a large thermal variation, and the ability of the building to breathe, shall we say, and expand and contract in order to avoid problems such as condensation is extremely important. Okay, so our architects have a route in Scandinavia where they deal with a lot more extreme temperatures. So some of those design philosophies and techniques have been incorporated into the design and to the forecast build method of the project. Next question. Right, we will be visiting the Algarve. Do you offer live tours of the site to get an appreciation of the area and the project? So yes, is the short answer for that. Clearly at the moment, we're actually filming this because we're demolishing the existing building and we're clearing up the site. So we're actually in the process of cleaning up the site. So our team on the ground is always available to show the location and the site context. So we don't encourage people to go onto the site now because there are machines working on it and it's not safe, but you can get a very good idea of the area and the distances and the context of Luz and the type of living that it is. So we'd be happy to meet and greet anyone that is visiting. As many of you will know, in April, there will be an important conference in the Algarve and aimed at foreign residents, foreign investors, potential future residents of the Algarve. And we will be trying to do two things in regards to Luz Living. The first is we will be trying on the 22nd of April in the afternoon, post that conference, if we haven't confirmed with the organizers yet, excuse me, if the conference sort of finishes mid-afternoon, which it usually does, then we will try to organize a visit for all of those that are interested in actually having a look at the site. But on the weekend, excuse me, I just need a little bit of water. On the weekend, we have what we call our group discovery tour. So post that conference, we'll be taking dozens of people on a group discovery tour where they discover the Algarve. And Praia da Luz will definitely be one of the destinations through which we will drive, because it's one of the most popular destinations for people settling in the Algarve. And so even if just at a glance, people who are on that tour will also get will have the ability to see the context of the location. We can't go down to the beach there because the streets are quite narrow, so we can't get the bus down. Sometimes if we have enough time, we can walk down to the beach from the main sort of parking area and so on. So we can do that, but there will be, both in a structured and just an informal way, if you wish to approach us and visit, there will be opportunities to visit the site. Right, so now we are back. So forgive me, I'm just going to stick to our agenda. We've now covered points 1 to 5. I'm now going to jump to point 6, which is Luz Living prices. And I will. So the first question I had or received was, are there 1-bedroom apartments still available? Yes, there are. We have 2 left. Okay, we only have 2 left. One is priced at 275,000 and the other one is priced at 299,000. Okay, and I've got a little slide there which I think you're seeing now, which just sort of explains what it's all about. So please don't get too bogged down with all the sort of different areas and so on. If you are interested, we can explain this. Just approach us, send us an email, and we can book a Zoom call and so on. We have what we call, I'll just explain this now so it's easier for everyone to understand. We have what we call a technical number. The architect gives this a very strange code, in my opinion. It took me ages to understand it, and you probably will never. So, and I don't fully anyway, but anyway, it is what it is. And then we have a legal number, so that those numbers are referred to the same apartment that will appear on the legal documents if you should buy this apartment. The type of view, as you saw from our virtual tour, is a pool or garden. The construction area with terraces. So there are various areas that you will see mentioned in Portugal, and this is a buyer beware thing. Be certain when you are comparing different products, investments, properties, that you're always comparing the same areas, because from a marketing perspective, agents will always put up the largest area, but it's not always the area that you want to do any calculations on. It's also not always the area that is of most relevance and use to you if you're thinking about putting your furniture in there or whatever. Okay, so just do take some care to make sure that you're comparing apples with apples if you are making a distinction or trying to make a distinction between different developments. And so in this case, these example, we have a total construction area with terraces of 118, 121 respectively, a gross internal area, the number of bedrooms and bathrooms. There is 1 garage space for each, and then there's a storage area which is included in the price, and that in this case is 6 square meters each. So that would be a lock-up separate area. The access is via the garage, and that's very secure. So if you are buying an apartment, and this is very important, if you want for as an investor, you, even as an owner, for example, and you use it only half of the year, let's say, and you want to lock up your personal belongings in that room, your guest does not have access to that room unless you want them to, of course, and you can have that as a lock-up, a separate thing. You can put in golf clubs, maybe some surfboards if you have any, any personal photographs that you take out when you're staying in the apartment yourself, that sort of small stuff, 6 square meters. And then interestingly, and I always make this point because I found it so interesting when we did the pricing on these things, we have stripped out, it's included in the price. So when I say 275,000, it includes the value of the garage, and we can't sell you a garage separately, and we can't strip it out, as it were, but it bears separating in terms of cost for the simple, and we have been, trust me, we have been conservative with this value. I have a long-standing interest in Luz. Our family has had family homes there for many years, and we were trying to look for a garage that we needed as storage. The cheapest we could find, which was an old basement of a building somewhere, fairly large, I admit, but maybe 40 square meters or something, 45,000 euros for literally the basement of someone's house that I don't even think was even, I don't know, I'm not sure exactly how we've been able to buy it. So the premium of closed, enclosed private garages in Praia da Luz is huge, probably actually higher than the value that we've actually stated on the different apartments, because those people who do have, let's say, a vehicle, let's imagine you have an electric vehicle, you have a special car or a motorbike that you want to store or whatever, you want that to be closed up. You know, you don't want it, especially if you're only staying part of the year, you want to the safety that vehicle. You may even have some other thing, you know, a small boat or whatever. You want to be able to make sure that those things can be safe. And so this cannot be underestimated in terms of the scarcity of private garages within the context of Praia da Luz and other towns. But I mean, Luz is what interests us. Lagos is a similar limitation. You will have more apartment blocks with private garages, but again, they're not commonplace, shall we say? Okay. So that's a little bit about the prices of the one-bedroom apartments. So are there two-bedroom? Now, I'm not going to go one by one through every apartment. I'm going to make some comments about some apartments in response to specific questions that I've received. And again, we're happy to share the price list. It's not publicly available, but we send it to potential clients. We try to make sure we only send you the prices of the apartments that you really are interested in, really. Rather than just flood you with just a list. That makes very little sense. And I should reiterate that in addition to this Q&A webinar, we're happy to do Zoom calls individually with people, because often we can explain the context a little bit better and help you figure out which apartment works well for you. I just wanted to, before I get on to the next question, make one point, and without sounding too salesy, but people have heard me in the past. We're very busy, fortunately, across our businesses. So we try not to sound too salesy. But if you are interested in a one-bedroom at Luz Living, you need to act quickly, because the one-beds will sell quickly. We only have 2 left. Great returns projections on the one-bedrooms, better than the 2-bedrooms, although they don't have the sea views and so on. But great rental projections. So either as a resident, somebody to maybe a single person or even a couple, or as an investment, we are confident that these things in the next couple of weeks will go and somebody will reserve them. So if that is of interest to you, please get in touch about the one beds in particular. Now, next question. Are there 2-bedrooms apartments still available? Yes, and prices start at 475,000 with very large terraces, typically 50 square meters plus terraces. And don't ask me, you can ask me and I'll explain separately, but the cheapest 2-bedrooms actually have the largest terraces, the main reason being that some of them don't have the sea view because they're on the ground floor, okay? And then, do the apartments have sea views? You've seen the mock-up. Hopefully someone will remind me with a question at the end. I will try and finish with a drone view, because I've got a link here and I can show you the drone view from one of the floors. And the views are just wonderful. They really are. It's not that the sea views are great in themselves, they are, but the scenery is interesting. There are houses, there is the hill, there is the sea. So it's an interesting sort of constantly changing scenario, which means that you can sit out there very peacefully throughout the year and expect something a little bit different. If the sea is choppy, you see the white waves. If the people are on the beach, you see the towels, you know. So it's an interesting view rather than just seeing the flat sea, which in itself can be beautiful, but you don't want to see that every day, same thing every day. Anyway, are there top floor apartments still available and what price? Yes, there are. I think there are about 5 or 6 still available of the 12 on the top floor. And they start at 575,000. So they are the premium apartments, as you can imagine. And if I can explain perhaps partly the reason for the pricing, a sea view in a place like Praia da Luz or Lagos represents around, as best as we can calculate and using all the expertise that we have and our partners have, represents between 50 and 75,000 euros in terms of the price of an apartment. Okay, so you could expect to pay a premium between an apartment that has, and this is a general comment, so you can apply this actually as a rule for the towns of Luz and Lagos, a 50 to 75,000 premium between a sea view and a non-sea view apartment, and then you will compare things such as number of bedrooms, how modern, age, location, and so on and so forth. But just on the sea view alone, 50 to 75,000 euros. Next question: is the final construction price fixed for the investor when you sign the contract? I.e., is my price locked in or subject to fluctuations during the contract, even if building costs or delays increase the cost of the project? So 3 questions in one. The answer are as follows. Yes, the price at which the exchange takes place is the value at which the developer, the developer Luz Living or Quality Living Algarve, is contractually bound to sell the property. So you will not pay more once you've agreed the price in the contract. Now, I understand there are 2 then further components to that question, and I'll come to those in a second. The prices will be reconfirmed prior to the promissory contract, but when we say reconfirmed, we're not going to increase them. Once you've reserved at a certain price, the developer has committed to selling you the property, and you at that price. Okay, that's why there's a reservation with the 10,000 euros. And what we're aiming to do is get everyone that's reserved to exchange, would be the term in many countries, or in Portugal, to sign the CPCV and pay their first payment, make their first payment at the same time. That's what we like to do. We don't, mainly because we have no need for the cash until the project is really ready to go and the machine's sort of digging. We've financed the demolition and the clearing of the site ourselves. We don't need the cash from other people to do that. So it's only when the actual main construction starts that we're wanting to move all the people who've reserved to the promissory contract, and I'll talk about that in a second. So the prices and the terms offered to anyone who have reserved will not be changes. In any case, for your protection as buyers, the reservation funds will be held by our lawyer and accompanied by a term of responsibility, which is called a faithful custodian statement. Okay, it's signed by the lawyer. These funds are held independently by the lawyer in their capacity as a lawyer, and they are, shall we say, overseen by the equivalent of the law association in Portugal. So there are repercussions if they use that for other stuff and so on. So those funds are safe, the small funds that we take as reservation. We don't see them as a developer, and they're held for you until you get to the promissory contract. And when you get promissory contract, that 10,000 will be taken off the amount due at the promissory contract stages. Now, due to the changes in the market, especially of raw materials and labor, we are still negotiating with the main contractor the terms of the final contract. We already have an agreement in principle around that, but because there have been some changes and some smaller delays in that regard, we're still finalizing that to see to what extent market changes need to be taken into account. And due to those increased construction costs, it is our estimate or best estimate at the moment that when we get to approximately 50% of the units reserved, we are likely to consider increasing the prices. Okay, so anyone who gets in before the 50%, and we're at 30 at the moment, gets in before the 50%, will probably lock in the current prices, and then we will take a view, depending on how the final numbers look in terms of construction costs and the like, but it is likely that we will see some element of price increases at around 50%. What we've also done is anyone who takes part in this webinar, so you'll need to somehow, we haven't done any pre-registration, so I'm not even controlling that. I really apologize. I'm not really even controlling. So a lot of people have signed on with first names only. I don't know who exactly it is, and we have dozens and dozens of people listening in. So if you then email me and let me know that you participated in the webinar, we have committed to anyone who takes part in this webinar or who has registered firm interest, there were a few reservations separately, that we will guarantee the current prices in the similar line, even if you kind of all then only manage to get to promissory contract after the others get to promissory. We want to make that clear because it may take us some time to respond and so on. So anyone who's actually taken part in this webinar has locked in the price according to the current price list, which will should not go up before the 50% at least. At least that's our expectation. Right. The next section is about Luz Living purchase plans and payment terms. And now I'm going to move to the a very, very busy slide, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to explain this in sort of some cohesive, coherent manner. But this is really a really important slide. So if I haven't explained this well, please put up a comment or the chat, and at the end I will come back to it and try to redo it. So I stole this slide from one of my old other presentations where I was presented to someone Luz Living as an investment opportunity, and there is a potential here even up to a 27% ROI on investment, and I will explain how we get to that with an example. But before I do that, I want to talk about the payment options. I've just had a little bit of a tremor on my screen, so I'm hoping it's not my drivers playing up, because I wouldn't like to do this all again, and so I'm hoping to tape this and then be able to publish it. Anyway, we have 4 payment options, and I will try to explain which option applies to more or less which type of circumstance. So the first is what we would term our standard payment option. This would be, I would say, typically for people that intend to buy to live at Luz Living. You would pay a 10,000 reservation. You would sign the promissory contract, and at that time, at that stage, pay 20%, less, of course, the 10,000 you've already paid. And then you would make stage payments and make a final payment of 30% on completion. And just to clarify the general comment about stage payment, the stage payments are set. I don't know if I have a slide on them. I think I do. But they basically will coincide with the key milestones in the project, time at which we will then need to pay the contractor, and you as a buyer will need to pay us, but they will be signed off. For those of you with any experience in construction, we have an external independent set of engineers typically that will validate whether the progress of the construction is according to the construction plan. And once that sign off is done, then the construction, the main contractor, is entitled to invoice us. And equally, we will have a mechanism whereby we are entitled to invoice you, and you're contractually bound to then make that next stage payment. So that all works in a cycle. And there will be, depending on your payment plan, there will be anywhere between, I believe it's 3 and 5 stage payments, which are all predefined. So the second payment option is the deferred final payment option. This is where you have someone who wants to perhaps mitigate sort of the ongoing cash flow, but also wants to use bank financing at the end at very realistic 50% loan to value type levels. And I'm saying 50% loan to value based on release prices or launch prices of this development, because if we are to assume that the prices continue to go up as they have been doing, and we expect to do, of course, the valuation of a bank at the end, in theory, should be higher than the actual purchase price of the unit. Whether a bank will value up the property is another question, but in theory, an independent valuer should take into account the market, and therefore the loan to value would be, in this case, 50% as a minimum, but it may be a little bit higher if it values up. Okay, so in this case, it would be 10,000 reservation, promissory contract with 50% down, and then the 50% on completion. Okay, which means you don't have to put up any other money except the 50%, which in many cases will be bank financed. Then there's the discounted payment option, basically because what we're doing here is instead of using the bank's money, we're using your money to pay for the various stages. And in this one here, that there would be a cost to the bank, there would be less cost, so we're giving that as a discount in kind to you as the buyer, and that would be a 10,000 reservation. Sign the promissory contract and pay 50%, then make 2 stage payments of 10% each and pay the 25% on completion, and you'll have noticed that that doesn't add up to 100, and that's because you get 5% discount off the price, okay, on completion, right? And then we have the investor offer, and this is the one that's a bit more complex to explain, but I'll do so, or try to do so in general terms, and that is 10,000 reservation, promissory contract and 10% down, okay, make stage payments, and then 40% is left to the end as a residual value, okay? But you are entitled to defer that payment or enter into what I've used JV, but I think our lawyers will probably kill me on that basis. It might not be the right term, but there will be a sort of joint ownership of the unit if you wish to do so on completion. And then there will be a co-ownership of that unit, which is perfectly feasible in Portugal. We will retain part ownership of that unit, the 40%. You will have paid 60%, and we will basically be sharing the proceeds and the costs of that unit, okay? The upside and the downside. The upside is total flexibility for you as an investor. I don't think there's anyone else offering this opportunity that I'm aware of in the Portuguese market. Downside, we control the timing, okay? Unless you tell us that you're going to move on to another payment option and pay us all the money, we control the timing. For example, if someone else comes along and says, I want to make an offer on that unit, and it's a fantastic offer, we have the right to say, to be able to say, well, we're now going to exit, and actually you're going to take your 60% of the profit, and we're going to take our 40% of the profit after having obviously paid the outstanding 40%, which is still due. But it's a very, very flexible, and for those of you who think like investors and work like investors, given the quality of the project and given the flexibility of the payment plan, even if you're querying whether this is more expensive or less expensive than another project, by the time you overlay this with the payment plan, there is nothing in the market that we're aware that has this chance of delivering this sort of return. And what we then exemplified, or done, is exemplified with a one-bedroom property below, okay? So I'm going to try to run through it, and forgive me because the dollar amounts, and these are US dollars, not Canadian, US dollars, they may be incorrect today because as I say, I pinched this from another presentation, and it was done whenever it was done, and so I used the rate at that day. The apartment price, for example, would be 275,000, so I've used the cheapest one. Reservation is 10,000, and then on promissory you're paying 17,500 because you've already paid the 10,000. So that would be the 10%. 10,000 plus 17,500 would add up to 27,500, which is the 10%. Okay, so hopefully everyone's still following me at this stage. Then there will be 5 stage payments of 10%. That's 27,500 each, spread over 2 years. Okay. Which is the expected delivery time. It's actually a bit less. I'll talk about the time frames in a second. We're getting quite tight now, but it's actually 21 months, and but we've always used 2 years as an example. 40%, so that's 110,000, is deferred until the resale. Okay, until the resale, or the point at which the unit is completed and it is available to be resold, should we wish, jointly, you as an investor and we as a developer. Now, average investment over the 2-year period is 110,000. How did I come up to that? We worked out when each of the payments was being made, and in time we've averaged this out. Okay, so it actually works out as an average of 110,000. Okay, which is probably around whatever it is, 40% of the 275,000. So the first point, for those of you who think like investors, the first point that I'm making is that you're getting into, in this case, a 275,000 euro property for 110,000 with no need to pay anything else, as long as you accept that you're sharing that asset then with someone else on a 60-40 basis. Okay, so in terms of access to the market, and as you can imagine, it is impossible for us to explain this in an email. This is why we're having this Q&A, especially for points like this. If you are thinking as an investor, this is unparalleled in the market. I mean, we as you can imagine, we shareholders, workers, investors, we want to make this attractive. We want to get people involved as investors, and we don't mind. If we had enough capital ourselves, we admit, we would probably keep some of these units ourselves, because we know that the returns on these units will be very, very interesting, and they will appreciate. But we want, as a developer, to exit our capital, at least a large part of it, because we want to do other projects, and I'll talk about that in a second. But from an investor perspective, it's really, really important to understand that you're getting into a deal of, let's say, whatever it is, X, at around 40% of the cost of X. That's your real cash output, and it's staggered. So the average cost will be that 110,000 over 275,000, but it's staggered over, in this case, approximately 2 years. So then we've made some suppositions. If the apartment is resold for 325,000, and I can't remember exactly the percentage, but what I can tell you is that there are apartments, one-bedroom apartments in Lagos and Luz already selling. Some of them may have sea views, some of them may not. Most of them don't. Already selling for 325,000. Okay, so we don't think we've been too bullish in our expectation of an increase in value of some of the apartments, or of the apartments of Luz Living. So if we assume a 325 sales price at the end of those 2 years, you will earn, as an investor, 60%. If you remember, you've paid 60, you're a 60% owner, we're a 40% owner. So if you do the sums, you're earning 30,000, which would be 27.2% return on your capital invested. Okay, then you divide it by 2 years, you halve that, whatever. But cash on cash return, what we're saying is very, very exciting, very interesting. And it means, I should just add this point, because I always come at this project from a residential perspective. I think once this is built, people will love it. Even if you're an investor, you're going to love it. And therefore, we're leaving this flexible enough so that people can swap from an investor point of view. Okay, you can pick that. We don't mind. We won't say, oh, you were trying to sort of shortchange us from our cash flow. We just want 38 people to form that community of owners and investors. And once we have those, if you want to swap from one payment plan to another, so be it. We're here to help. Okay, so hopefully that's been reasonably clear, not clear as mud, as I say. But if that wasn't clear, please put up a comment, and at the end I will get to it. So what are the time frames for each step of the purchase? Going down to another slide. And again, I'm so sorry that it's so busy, but I didn't have time except to take from our business plan the various bits of information. We have 4 payment plans, as you've gathered, depending on the different payment options. And I'm just going to pick the first one, if I may, which sees us. Now I've actually got the top of my slide is blocked by the Zoom bar, but anyway, I should remember this. You've got the year 2022 and the year 2023. That's our current projection of timing. Okay, so if we go to promissory contract in the second quarter of 2022, then the first plan will see you paying that first amount, and I can't see it. I think it should say 20%, and I hope that it does. Then you'll see there's a stage at foundations, a stage at structure, which are 10% each, then the stage at windows, painting and finishes, and so on and so forth, until the 30% at the end. Okay, so this may be slightly adjusted. And we will then obviously adjust this according to the construction schedule and the actual construction schedule. But I think the message is, and it comes back to that question that was put to us by someone: will you pay for the delays? No, you will not. Admittedly, if there is a delay, your money may sit there for a little while longer, and in pure investment terms, your return will reduce because you're dividing by a longer period. So I fully admit that there may be some cost if there is a delay, but you're not actually paying anything extra. And we would not take any money unless there's been the formal sign-off by the engineer of that particular phase. It's also the reason, to be fair, you don't know us. You may even know us, but you don't have to necessarily believe us until you see things happening. And therefore, we prefer not to have gone to the promissory contract. It would have given us an extra element of security and safety going to a promissory contract quickly. But then we would have had, if any delay, we would have had to have gone back to the investor and explain and, and do this and do that. And that's not fair. So we have a fully reimbursable reservation deposit at the moment, and we will only go to promissory when we're ready to sort of start putting the digger in the ground. So those are the payment terms. You can see they pretty much match the construction timeframes, and they will help you plan your cash flow, as it were, in terms of the financial inputs that you're going to make into the project. Right. Next question. We're at 28. We've got the 28th question so far, for those of you counting. We have seen several projects around us in Lisboa. One of our clients who actually lives in Lisbon, incur severe delays in completion. Is the Q4 2023 timeframe realistic? I should say we have not been immune to these delays ourselves. Those of you who've known us know that this project, we actually acquired this project some years ago, and we had a totally unexpected delay of almost 2 years. Due to totally unrelated matter, nothing to do with us, but we were dragged into it. And so this project is a bit heartbreak in a sense, because we had to battle through a number of bureaucracies and legals and so on. Anyway, we overcame that about a year ago, in the end of December 2020, beginning of January 2021, and we've then been making this sort of subsequent adjustments and so on to the whole project, and slowly reintroducing it into the market because we were literally stopped. So I feel for the fellow developers in Portugal, because really it's a tough landscape within which to operate. However, down to the objective, what you need to know. We have the construction license paid for and issued. We've triggered that because we started clearing the site and demolishing the existing building. We are hoping, and I'm hoping that the filming, we've got one of those time-lapse cameras that one of our existing clients in another project is filming from his balcony. So we're hoping that will work out well, and we'll do a time-lapse when everyone can see it. So we've started the work. Now, if we can, I don't know why that $ is there, but that should read Q4 2023. I probably pressed the shift button. If that is a realistic time frame, will depend in part on the main contractor. And I'm going to answer that in the next point, which is when will the construction begin? So because we've started to demolish and clear the existing building and clear the site, the construction was scheduled to commence in Q2, okay? But if the season gets too close, what we've gathered from the main contractor is that they have a cost of actually putting out all their equipment in the on site. And if they feel that they're getting too close to the summer, and because Luz is quite a touristic location, and there may be complaints, whatever building in the summer, we're checking this as we speak. They may ask us to delay until just immediately after the summer. That will mean there will be a slight delay. It won't be by much, but a few months, but nonetheless a slight delay. We're still hoping that they can work through this scenario in the sense of starting, maybe hibernating, and then doing something different. But we understand that the context is difficult because of not only the pandemic, but also the follow-on issues around the influence. And this is where the Ukrainian conflict does create a bit of an influence in terms of the supply of materials, the time frames, and their ability or not to be able to manage, shall we say, the scheduling of their equipment, things like diggers and whatever. They can't have them stand still because it's impossible to import others or move them around. The cost of fuel is too high. Anyway, I won't bore you with all the details. There are contextual circumstances which, due to this latest unfortunate conflict, have meant that we've sensed perhaps a bit of hesitation around the main contractor in terms of timing. But we will, as soon as we know something which if it does, hopefully it doesn't, but if it does, anything that affects that time frame, we'll let you know. However, key thing is there should be nothing that is within our direct control that should delay the project, because we've overcome all those difficult hurdles. So and we've had a lot of neighbors actually already asking us, oh, how's the construction going? You know, I've got my thing rented, you know, when are you going to be making noise? So, you know, everyone's now thinking of their own situation, whether they can lose rentals. And so what we don't want is, we don't want bad neighborliness and you know, to cause huge upset with all the people around us, because we have, you know, other buildings and so on. So we're dealing with the management of the other resorts. We're talking with individual neighbors. You know, we're going to try and maybe talk to the neighbors to have a bit of a group explanation. Maybe even some of them will want to buy in Luz Living. We don't know. Anyway, as you can see, this is a community project as much as it is a financial or real estate project. And so we want the community to exist within the Luz Living, and we want the community to exist in the context of Praia da Luz. So which bank, next question, which bank will finance the remaining 40% of the mortgage of the investor plan option? Clearly this answer would also apply to the 50% of the deferred payment option. And the answer is very simple. Any Portuguese lender should in theory be able and willing to finance the remaining 40 or 50%, subject to you as a buyer or investor meeting, or a resident of course, meeting the eligibility criteria. Okay, so we're very confident that there won't be any problem with the project or the product. It will qualify. The banks will love it. In fact, the banks with whom we're talking about the financing love the project anyway. So we don't foresee any problems with them, you know, seeing this built project and not loving it. So it's all down to you as an investor. The loan to values are very reasonable. If you keep the money that you've put in the deal, the loan to values are much lower than the average loan to values for most financing in Portugal. And therefore you won't have an issue. There is one area you need to consider, and that's in the next question, question 31, which is, I've taken the text from an individual client, and they've said, I am 69 and my husband is 89, in excellent health. They put in inverted commas, in parentheses, in brackets. And I understand we cannot get a bank loan in Portugal. So is there going to be an alternative financing option? Okay, now, obviously I haven't gone and discussed this in detail with the person. I only got the question yesterday, so I don't know their entire circumstances, but I've made some assumptions. And the assumption is that they wish to live here. Okay, so I'm not going to provide as a solution or suggestion the investor option, which would have been the deferred 40% and a joint venture with us. Although I should state this, we are even willing to consider that. If you are a resident, but you've gone for the investor option, then there will be 60% of the rental, this has to be open market rental, will be payable by you. Apologies, 60% is not payable by you because you own 6%, and 40% is. And if there's a difference in real terms in cash, you will have to pay us the difference. Otherwise, you know, the money just sort of circulates back to you. So we are even willing to operate an investor model with the resident, with the owner residing in that unit for however long and working out the sums in terms of the rental amount. We have no problem whatsoever with this because it's the residential model that we want to implement. So happy with that. So that may in fact be a solution for the person who asked this question, although it's not the obvious one. The answer to the question is as follows. The reason that people are worried about the financing is because at 65 is actually the age beyond which banks start to impose some limitations, and 75 usually a cutoff for any new financing. The problem is not only the length of the loan itself, because typically banks will not want to lend beyond a certain end age, shall we say 85, whatever it is, I can't remember, whatever it is. But it's also the fact that they demand life insurance. And very few players in the Portuguese market offer life insurance beyond 75. And between 65 and 75, the number of life insurance providers is limited. And therefore the banks, having demanded this as a criteria of the issuing of a mortgage, of a loan, they find that, well, they created their own problem, of course. They find that, or you will find that if you are age limited, shall we say, in terms of being in a more advanced age, then you may have, you may confront this problem. Now, there are three solutions that are typically have been applied by other people in other contexts with similar problems. The first one, or similar, it's not really a problem, but it is a problem because the bank won't lend. But so situations, if I can use that word. The first is if you have a partner or spouse who is younger, then apply for the mortgage. The younger spouse should apply for the mortgage, and the older spouse or partner acts as a guarantor. Okay, this is something that works well. And again, you can talk to us because we have mortgage advisors, and they would be able to help you work through this scenario. The second thing is your children take out the mortgage, and you do a private contract with them to ensure that you cover the repayments. Now, the form of that contract is up to you to define how much you trust your children or they trust you, and blah, blah, blah. That's a private matter, but that means that the mortgage will be based on their eligibility, their incomes, and so on and so forth. And if they believe in the project, and we're happy, again, if this happens or if this arises, and we've got two couples in this scenario, happy to have a Skype call with the entire family. You know, when I say Skype call, a Zoom call, Skype call, whatever, with the entire family, and talk through the scenarios of why this would work for one and the other, and the advantages for one and the other. Okay. And then the third scenario, which we've seen, I can't remember exactly the term used in all countries, but is an equity release in your home country. So you basically take a mortgage, whether it's primary, secondary, on any of your real estate assets there, pay the mortgage in local currency, and then pay cash in Portugal. Clearly the risk here is some currency exposure, but some currencies are particularly strong at the moment, so that may actually be an intelligent play. And you may want to release equity and go for one of the sort of higher percentage options in Luz Living, knowing that over time, and I did this analysis, for example, between the euro and the US dollar over I think it was around a 3 to 4 year period, sort of late 2017 to 21. Obviously this is why there's a huge market in Forex, but the fluctuation's been up and down. But when I looked at the two dates, there were almost precisely the same exchange rate between the dollar and the euro in 2021 as there was in 2017, for example. And so I think what you can do is there is some risk, currency risk. There are some ways of mitigating this, but also I think you do stand the opportunity as things work out to have your income, for example, in a currency that may over time be a little bit stronger. So you may actually find yourself benefiting in terms of some of your repayments back in your own currency, or you may wish to hedge against that by forward buying some currency and taking out the risk. So those are three scenarios for those of you who are worried about age influencing your ability to get a mortgage. And of course, many people will just be buying cash or the equivalent of cash, you know, by releasing cash from some investments and then freeing that up and buying. So that's clearly, that has no impact on getting a mortgage. Right. Next section is the one on Luz Living, rentals and returns. So I've put up that screen, but I'm going to not put it up because otherwise people get distracted. I'm first going to answer some questions that have an effect, an impact on rentals, and then I'll come back to the screen. So the first question in this section is, how many units will be sold for permanent resident owners or investment rental opportunity owners? Is there an objective, or desire to manage the number, the percentage of full-time owner residents versus the number of medium-term visitors, guests. So we expect the mix to be 60-40 initially, but that's an estimate. Okay, it's only an estimate. And at 30%, we probably have more or less that mix anyway. I haven't actually looked at it, but we don't know. What we do expect is the ratio to move more towards residents as people get a sense of the quality living that is possible at Luz Living, and as investors reach retirement age themselves. So we have investors, you know, I think our youngest investor probably is in 40s, and they're not thinking necessarily of this as a residence for themselves, although they've left that door open. But if they do get to the stage where they think, you know, this would be a great place for me, then I think there will be a gradual move of investor to resident, especially if the investor plans to make Portugal their home at some point in the future, or their base at some point in the future. We have no preference as to the model, whether it's a resident or an investor then rents out, because there is a similarity of pattern, and I'll talk about that a little bit in a few minutes in terms of our rental model. There's a similarity of pattern between the residents and the tenants of the investors, and you'll see what I mean when I describe what we're thinking of doing in terms of the rental model. And the beauty of this is because we're applying a residential model based on medium and long-term rentals, rather than you know, the touristic model, which is people in and out all the time, weekly changeovers, cleans, you know, people breaking stuff and then having to substitute, that sort of thing. So we don't want that environment at all. Precisely because we don't want any owner occupier or any tenant of an investor to feel as though they're being pushed out of their own home, or made to feel as though they're living in a holiday complex for part of the year. Honestly, I mean, we want every investor or every buyer. For us is important, as you can imagine. I'm speaking as a developer. If you buy a unit from us, that helps us achieve our objective. But what I can't do is promise something that the development is not. And if you're looking for a pure play holiday tourist development, and you're looking for sort of week in, week out, people changing and coming in and out, it's not Luz Living. There are hundreds, literally, of these small, medium, and large developments across the country, and specifically the Algarve. And I would say it's one of the huge differentiators between Luz Living and the comparable quality, shall we call it, new build product, is that you could live, even some of the large developers in the Algarve, they are delivering projects of 100, 150, 200 units that have no limitations whatsoever, and in fact encourage a touristic model, which means that you're going to have dozens, if not hundreds, of apartments churning over tenants on a week in, week out basis. This is not conducive to quality in our opinion. In particular, the quality of a small, and this is small, 38 units environment. You know, that is not conducive to the kind of people that are looking for a quality, almost exclusive, without wanting to be in any sense elitist, because the nature of the project, the prices, and the fact that it is a private condominium will make it to some degree exclusive. This is not conducive for those people who buy into that experience and that model, to then be sitting and being overrun by these constant sort of touristic periods, you know, a week at Christmas and 2 weeks at Easter, and you know, and 2.5 months in the summer. It's not consistent. So the financial projections and expected rental income, which I'll now come to, including ongoing maintenance costs, closing costs, and total purchase costs. So again, there are many scenarios. We tend not to be too bullish. We have a huge experience in this market. We're probably in a separate business. We already operate the Algarve's largest portfolio of medium to long-term rental properties, around 250 or so. So we understand this market intimately, and we can assure you that there is demand for this model. Whether it will always deliver the maximum returns when compared to touristic rentals, I will answer that question in a second or in a few minutes, but I first want to go through the potential rental return. So I've taken an example of a one-bedroom, a two-bedroom, one-bathroom, and a two-bedroom, two-bathroom property, and just picked out a couple of the key numbers, okay, with the usual caveats at the bottom, please. These are estimates. Things can go up and go down. We have to validate. So please read the caveats, but I think you'll get the sense that we're not just making this up. We are trying to stick to some degree of realism about the scenario. So if you take the purchase price, the taxes involved, the legals and the admin associated with the purchase, the condo fees, which are estimated again, the yearly property taxes, and other annual costs, which tend to be insurance and other stuff. I can't remember exactly what's in there, but it's all costed. We have done an estimate of the rental that can be achieved on two bases. Okay, the one is the annual rental. So this is where you basically find, as an investor, we find them for you. We have a long list of people waiting for this. You find a tenant that wants the property for the entire year. Now, let me tell you something that's important and why there's a demand for this. At the moment, so just statistically, we have turned away hundreds, I prefer not to say how many, but hundreds of people who have asked us for medium or long-term rentals just in the Algarve. Okay, we get requests from all over the country, but a big concentration in the Algarve, just in the Algarve. And many of those have been visa applicants, so the so-called D7 visa applicants. There's a huge opportunity for investors here to take a very, very solid look at this opportunity as a solid and consistent return investment opportunity, where a subset or a segment of the demand will come from new residents into Portugal. Okay, and on that basis alone, we could probably fill this entire project, Luz Living. I'm talking from a rental perspective. Okay, that's how strong the market is and foreseen to continue. So the first thing we always say when we look at the returns is, where is that demand coming from? And it is there, not only from that sector of the market, but from others, and it is there in spades, as some people would say it. Our teams are spending, in our separate business and one of the other businesses in which I'm involved, our teams are spending most of their time now either responding to client requests or actually trying to find more inventory due to lack of stock. And this comes back to the point I had made earlier on, which is, why are we as an investor interested in this segment? Because not only demographically is it interesting, but also just in terms of general trends of the market, there are people who want to move to Portugal, don't necessarily want to buy, they want to reside, and they want quality, they want luxury, they don't want the humidity, they don't want the cold, and they want the kind of quality offering. Just in Lagos and Luz, we have had requests, I would say at least a half dozen, for what we would term not cheap rental properties, and we cannot assist them. We're talking of people with budgets between 2,000 and 5,000 euros a month, and we don't have enough product for that market sector. And this project fits exactly into that market sector. So if you're an investor, you're not only, shall we say, counting on the fact that the new build retains its value and is growing, that the whole market opinion is of continued growth, but also that you have this underlying demand, a section of which is coming from the movement of people to, in this case, Portugal, for residency. So if you look at the numbers, so forget the actual numbers, but in terms of percentages, The one bedrooms, the one bedroom has an annual return of 5.4% if it's used annual rental. A 2-bed 1-bath 4.7%, and a 2-bed 2-bath 4.5%. And again, we're saying, you know, we're not being too bullish about this. Okay, that's our nature and our style. But we also have another model, which is called the extended summer and winter rent. And so we've had this phenomenon this year, more so than any other year. And that is a number of people who are wanting to remain in Europe, in this case, Portugal, during what we call an extended summer let. So we've turned again away men's people who've said to us, oh, I want to start in April and I want to end in October. And we say, well, firstly, you're too late because most of the things are full or some periods are booked. But even if you wish to do so, we hope that you're not expecting to pay annual or winter rents. What you're doing is you're basically occupying the most popular period of the year. And at best, owners will give you a slight discount on a weekly rate. So what we've done is we've created the concept of the extended summer rental, which is a hybrid model. So we have identified a subsection of the market. For example, people from Florida with higher humidity who actually want a low humidity environment, they would be more than happy to spend it in the heat in what would be essentially a cheaper environment than remaining in Florida. They could even rent out their own home to cover the cost of being in the Algarve, which has no or negligible humidity. So they may come from the Middle East and they may want to do that. So there is a subsection of the market that wants the extended summer stay and is prepared to pay for it. Okay, because they understand the values, and that can then be complemented by the winter stays, which could be anywhere from 7 to 8 months or whatever it may be. It also works out very well for people who come from very cold places, Canada, the northern states of the US, Northern Europe. They want to spend the winters down south, and then we can fill the gap, for 4 or 5 months in the summer with a single client. And this is the key thing. Because we're not renting by the week, clearly the profitability on paper is not necessarily as high as if we rented it every week. But there are no voids, and we're getting a totally different tenant. We're getting a stable tenant that is typically someone who can afford to spend that period of time over the summer. So it's either a very wealthy digital nomad, or it's probably someone who is pre-retired or retired, who can work from a distance or doesn't need to work and can actually spend the time. So you're getting the right demographic. And that's the underlying base that's driving this. And if you just the difference between the annual and the extended summer and winter adds about a percentage point, between a half and a percentage point of yield onto your return. Okay, so we understand, and this will be part of the service because it'll be paid, and I'll talk about those costs in a second. This is part of the service that the team at Luz Living will provide. We intend to have a fully managed rental management, whatever you want to call it, solution, which allows both owners who want to rent their property for a period of time and investors. Both of those will be able to cater for those without changing the nature and the philosophy of Luz Living as a community. Okay, so we know how to respect how to implement a model that will allow the concept to be respected, so that hopefully no one will feel that they've bought into something that then later turns out to be yet another touristic development. That's not what's intended. And we can still deliver the returns with a high quality client that delivers very interesting returns for Europe. Certainly much higher returns than any comparable, let's call it expensive or new build project by the time you've taken the management costs and so on into account. And by the way, I should just point it out, I think I said it, but these are estimated, for example, condo fees, but we have fully costed this as best we can, of course. We have fully costed these returns. So we've taken into account all the closing cost and so on. We're not just sort of dividing the revenue by the purchase price and forgetting about all the other stuff. We've tried to be fair. Maybe it sounds a little bit less attractive than maybe some other developments, but what you get here is perhaps a higher, we hope, is a higher degree of transparency in terms of how we've come about the numbers and explaining how we would manage the model. Okay. One final point on that in terms of the expected rental return and income is that it does not, of course, take into account appreciation or expected appreciation. And again, I say this with conservatism, but for the first time in a long time in the Portuguese market, for the last year and a bit, I have felt comfortable for the first time since 2008, I would say, to talk about potential capital appreciation in the Portuguese market. And I think that that appreciation is not going to be generalized, but it is going to, one of the areas of possible appreciation is quality new build product in desirable location. I mean, if you put a phenomenal new build villa in the middle of nowhere, that's not going to appreciate, you know, maybe a little bit, but that you can't count on that appreciation. But in this sort of location, which is prime, premium, and I won't get into all the things, for those of you who come on the discovery tour who meet us on site, we will explain how Praia da Luz, such an upmarket destination, lacks quality new build product, where basically that village is living off its reputation of its charm, because so much of the product is old. It's old and it's not fit for purpose anymore. So huge opportunity there in terms of anyone who owns in a project like Luz Living, differentiating themselves from the rest of the local market. And that's important to understand what the driver is. The French, the Swedish, the Americans, all love modern, functional, you know, a product. They will not necessarily, unless they, you know, and people are increasingly less likely to do refurbishment projects. So you want to be able to make sure that you're dealing with the kind of product that's appealing to you as an investor or resident, but also to the next wave of the market if you're thinking of leaving. When I say leaving, I mean reselling. Right. Next question. The condominium or HOA cost projections seem quite low for a condominium with so many amenities. How is this possible? I agree, actually. We've tried to maintain it competitive, and again, with a caveat that this is an estimate, and you know, we're living in probably the highest predicted inflationary period that we've seen in, I don't know, 20, maybe more years. So, you know, these estimates will be wrong, but so will everyone else's then as well. So I think it's all relative, and hopefully you've understood that we're trying to be as transparent as we can in terms of the numbers that we're presenting. The fundamental reason that we believe we can keep the HOA or condo fees low is because of the operating model. And this is very, very important for us to again differentiate. Most of the touristic condominiums, and a good example is Villa Bahia next door, for example, those who know it, or the other one up the hill, Stella de Luz, which is the same developer as Bahia next to us. They would charge maybe 2,500 to 3,000 euros per annum for a studio apartment, 3,000 to 4,000 for a one bed, and 4,000 to 5,000 for a two bed or more. Can't remember exactly. I think some are even a little bit higher. And one of the reasons that is there is third-party management that makes approximately 20% plus VAT as a management fee. Okay. In addition, for those investors or those renting the apartments, most touristic projects that are managed at resorts charge rental commissions, cleaning, and other services, all of which have their own margins plus VAT on top. So the Luz Living operating model aims to be different on all of the points. So the developer will retain the management role on the basis that included in the account. So, you know, for all owners, we will present accounts, okay? And in those, and therefore the condominium of each apartment will be an estimate or actual cost to cover the time of its management. So it's it's a management of the resort, but a management of the activities associated to the resort, rather than appending this as an extra outsourced cost for the management of rentals, for example. So you'll pay a fee, but it will be the actual cost of the people or the percentage of time of those people that are actually spending time managing that. The other thing is that the rental commission, or part of it, depending on whether the expertise is brought in-house fully or remains with a third party, will accrue to the condominium. This is unheard of. It's we're trying to be innovative in what we're doing, and this is absolutely unheard of. So we will manage the rentals, and we will charge you, let's say I'm looking now at someone who's an investor, you've bought your unit, we're managing the rentals, and of course we're going to charge you because we found the client, we're going to charge you a commission. But part of that commission will come because you're already paying the fee or part of the cost of the person actually doing the work. We're not quite sure it's going to be called an employee or not. That's a legal administrative matter that my business partner is much better prepared to answer than I am. But because that cost, the base cost, is already covered, we're just delivering the service that we're being paid to do, okay, to a point. And this is the internal, external. So a portion of that will come back to the company, okay? And that company, well, who will be the beneficiaries of that HOA? Well, you, the investor, again. So you're getting the revenue net of the commission to you, as is your due, and you'll pay tax on that. But then there's a portion of that that will come back into that, and you will be the beneficiary in 1/38th, for example, to make the sum simple, of that commission that or part of that commission that has been earned. And this is a model that doesn't exist anywhere else. So every time that we have a revenue generating opportunity linked to Luz Living with the approval of the owners, and of course of the condominium rules or the HOA rules which we will set up, the revenue will accrue in total or in part to the owners of the units via a credit on the accounts of the condominium. And this doesn't, honestly, I don't know anyone else who does this. And that's one of the main reasons why we estimate that whatever our value of the condominium is, on a like-for-like basis with similar developments in terms of amenities, if not the concept, the condominium ours will always have the tendency to be more competitive because the revenue will cycle back to the owners. And that's part of building a community. We don't want the owners and the investors to be totally separate from the community that we want to create. And that's as much a financial and investment community as it is a resident or residential community. Okay, so hopefully I haven't gone on. I get a bit excited about this because we feel quite passionately about the model as a key differentiator, but hopefully that's come across. Now, clearly, the properties will be yours. You will own them, even if I keep one or buy one or whatever. I mean, the general ownership of the project will be spread among all the owners. And so, if people get fed up of this and they decide by a majority to change the condominium rules and make it touristic or whatever, that will be built into the decision-making structure of the condominium rules. But what we can guarantee is we, as a developer, owning most of or all the units at the start, because you only get possession of those once you've paid us the full amount, we will set the rules and they will be in line with what we've more or less described. So we aim to make it a residential community, in the main. Right. Will there be, next question, will there be a furnishings package available to unit owners? Will you please discuss the details? Yes, as styles change, we have not yet locked those out, but we've been approached by multiple furniture pack providers who can, provide a range of actually quite attractive and appealing, more modern, less modern, whatever, options. Again, residential, therefore we're not forcing anyone to take a furniture bag. This is not our core business. If you want to bring your own furniture, if you want to buy as an investor and rent unfurnished, there's a scarcity of unfurnished rentals in the Algarve. Of our portfolio in the other business of around 250, I think we have 3 unfurnished. And of course, it's a niche market, but a niche market that you as an investor may wish to play in. And there's not really a difference actually in the rent that can be requested between an unfurnished and a furnished renter, because the difficulty for people who want unfurnished is they have the complexity of getting rid of someone else's furniture or the cost of storing their own. So again, you may, and this is something we recommend to investors, don't make a decision about furnishing yet. We had this with one of our other investors, one other business. They bought a golden visa through purchase of a large unfurnished property. we recommended they didn't furnish immediately, and we found a tenant for an unfurnished, a family that had 3 children, and they had their own furniture, and they wanted to move from Vila Moura to Lagos, and they did. And so there's no need to take a decision on this, but the answer is yes. We'll have options of furniture pack, and we will of course negotiate discounts, which will mostly accrue to you. We may earn a small commission on that, but we mostly accrue to you because we will negotiate the volume. Okay. And I should just make a point about the furniture. We will make aware and to people what these options are. And if you then as investors and owners want, and if you're interested in this sort of furnishing turnkey and you want us to sort of manage this together with these companies, tell us which packs. We will give you this to analyze, and tell us which packs you kind of like, and we will then go in and do the negotiations or the adjustments on your behalf. That's what it's like. You know, it's small enough of a development and of a project to be personalized. We don't need to worry about sort of being coy about that. Now, next question: what is the tax for long-term rental, and how does it compare to tax on short-term rentals under AL? AL is a thing called Alojamento Local, which is the local lodging legislation, which regulates typically rentals of less than 1 year of a shorter term nature. And I'll make a couple of comments which are actually interesting, again, for people who are considering the investor model. So, answer to the question: 28% is the capital gains tax on rental, decreasing in a stepped fashion. I think it's down to 23%, but I didn't have time to recheck that, for very, very long multi-year contracts. I don't know anyone who's on sort of 23. I do know a few people who are sort of down to the 25-ish level after having reached more than, I think, 5 or 10 years. Okay, so that's for the long-term rental contracts. Okay, and that's on gross income. On short-term rental, the so-called AL, you pay 50% of 28, and that's gone up. That used to be, I think it used to be 25. I forget now. It seems so long ago, but anyway, it used to be about 3 or 4% gross in total. It's now 14, and on top of that, if you generate more than 10,000 euros in income, you have to pay VAT of 6%. Except in the first year, there's no trading history, so the first year you kind of get a bonus. You only pay the 14%. After that, it's basically 20%, including the VAT. And this is across all your property rentals. So it's not per property. If you own more than one property in Portugal and you're generating income from all of them, you have to pool that income, and that's what sets your VAT threshold, because you become, in essence, a sort of a sole trader rental business, and it's that business with you as the named owner that is generating the income. I did want to make a point about a nuance here, and I won't say too much because Rui, our lawyer and business partner, he is much better equipped then to talk about this. But I will make a point, and that is that the legislation allows, as far as I'm aware, for local lodging to be operated up to 1 year. So if you are operating, for example, a hybrid model where, and remember, the hybrid model does not mean, in the case of Luz Living, you sort of turning over people on a week-by-week basis, please. Okay, I'm not going back on my word, and I'm not changing the business model. But if you operate the hybrid model and you have, let's say, a 4 months rental in the summer, that in theory could still be done under AL with the taxes paid as per the AL rules. Okay, there's a need to analyze that in a little bit of detail in terms of how utilities may or may not be included in that. Typically on a long-term rental, they're not. They may need to be with a cap on short-term rentals. But the point I'm making is that the flexibility of our model means that you can opt, and it's perfectly feasible to have both in place. So the ability to operate long-term rentals under arrendamento or short-term rentals under AL, and activate, shall we say, one or other. They have slightly different processes, and this is perfectly foreseen under the rental laws in Portugal. So what we're saying is a well-managed property that has the ability to generate this income in the way that we've described really will not suffer, especially by the time you've taken voids or the influences of, goodness forbid, it doesn't happen to the same extent, again, the pandemic that we've had in the last 2 years, the tourism income fell flat. The medium to long-term rental income had never been stronger. You know, the medium to long-term owners, the owners who opted for medium to long-term rentals when the pandemic hit, they did not feel financially, of course, I'm talking about, we all felt many other difficulties, but financially, they did not feel any, I would hazard to say, difficulty, except for perhaps a very short period of time between March and June of 2020, any financial difficulty or different relative to other years. In fact, better. They performed better, whereas tourism was dead for all intents and purposes for a big chunk of that time. And that's the thing, where you may punctually on a short-term tourism basis have a good year, but it isn't going to be 2022, and it might not be 2023 yet, when you compare to the hybrid model that we operate, which is solid and delivers return year after year because we work it well in advance. So that's really important to know. If somebody tells you an analysis, oh, short-term rental is better than long-term, it may be, but our experience, and especially in the last 3 years, is it has not been, and we don't foresee that to change, to be quite fair. And we've shown you the numbers in terms of taxes. The taxes could be 8% different, but of course the yields will quickly kill that. And especially if you have high condominium fees or you have high management fees, then even worse. Right, what will be the regulations or restrictions regarding the rental of my unit, both long and short term? Right, so there are no restrictions long term, as I think I've made clear. But there will be some limitations on short term, and we will include this in the condominium regulations via a minimum rental period, as well as a surplus cost for anyone who licenses and attempts to rent for a short period or shorter than normal. And so we've got to understand what is possible. And again, I will defer to Roy probably on some of the more detailed technical answers, but broadly speaking, the condominium does have some say as to how a condominium runs, okay? And that's why there is a condominium regulation or an HOA, some would call it a regulation, and an HOA body, and so on and so forth. And those rules are made and intended to be adhered to, okay? But we're not the police, we're not the government, we're not imposed. There's the law, and the law states that, you know, a person owns a property, they're entitled to use that property within the law and within the rules of the condominium. So what we can do in the condominium is we can agree that the condominium charges will be substantially higher for those who breach the rules. And I believe we can charge as much as 30%, and we will do so. Because if someone is intending to breach the concept and whatever, and of course, it's not just going to happen overnight. There will be conversations, and we will need to sort of talk to the person, and you know, and we do a lot of this vetting before. We've lost a couple of sales to people who insisted they wanted to rent only short term. We did not want that, and we lost those sales regrettably, because I think they didn't fully think through the effects and things like the pandemic and the like. But nonetheless, it is what it is. So we will clearly make this point to potential buyers, but we will also try to work with you and show you that it is very possible to generate the sort of levels of income that you would have without the stress of the short-term rental market. Okay, but in answer to the question, that is the answer. There will be some limitations to make sure this doesn't turn out to be another touristic development. There was a question actually that said, what are the expected returns based on the rental model that Luz Living will allow or implement? Will medium and long-term lets not mean that I will earn less than if I rented short-term? I think I've partly answered this question, and that is not necessarily. For example, during the pandemic, when the tourism market fell so markedly, many short-term rentals actually owners flipped into the long-term rental market, precisely because it offered the certainty of demand, the greater stability, and so on. Also, expenses were paid at cost by the tenants, meaning that situations such as people leaving the air conditioning on in the summer, while they're going out to the beach and leaving the door open, and sitting on the terrace. I mean, this is ridiculous, especially because energy is at an all-time high because, again, of the circumstances that we're encountering. So the question here is, how soon will it take the management of these resorts to start charging you much more? And suddenly you get a big bill saying, oh, my rates are still the same as last year, but my energy bill for those 4 weeks in July, instead of being 230 euros, were 440 euros, and suddenly your return is lower. So we take this out because in most circumstances, we want the tenant to take responsibility for their heating, their cooling, or whatever, because every person is different. If I feel like using more blankets instead of switching on my heating, well, then that's my decision. Although we hope you won't have to do that in Luz Living, because the insulation and the ventilation will avoid those kind of extreme situations. I don't know if it was clear, but I wanted to reiterate just one more time that the hybrid model, we feel, is the one that provides the greatest flexibility. And just as a corollary to that, when we say hybrid, we don't mean you just have to take 5 months in the summer and then 7 months in the winter. For example, if you as an owner decide you want 3 months one place and 3 months later on in the year, anything that turns the interim month, if you want to rent them, of course, there are some people that will just close up the apartment, perfectly feasible, very safe, closed condominium, no risk really. You can do that, but anything that lends itself to stability of residence of the people is what we're looking for. Okay, so we will even consider, in the extreme, we will even consider a 1 month, for example, rent, if it's someone that is looking for a rent in order to stay type solution. So you may want to, for example, open the door to someone who says, listen, I'd like to get to know what Luz Living would be like to live in for a month or two before I make a final decision. I think that's perfectly acceptable, because the motivation of those people is with the medium to long term in mind. So I hope you'll agree with me. Well, I'm not trying to bend, or we're not trying to bend the rule or buckle the rules. We're trying to implement the philosophy rather than trying to act like sort of the short stay police, as it were. That's not our role. We want the community emphasis to come across. Right. Will rental management services be available through Luz Living? And if so, at what cost? So the answer is yes, full management will be available. So for long lets, marketing and rental fees will be charged on top of an agreed base rental to the tenant. Okay, so we have a very different model to everyone else in the market. Again, this is thanks to our experience of now several years in the medium to long-term rental market in the Algarve. We charge this as a premium on top of the agreed base rental to you as an owner or investor, and the tenant pays that. And they pay that to make sure that we can facilitate, in this case in Luz Living, the part of the services that are needed by the tenant, that they're contributing their fair share to that, and of course amortizing the work that we have in terms of marketing and the like of finding the tenant. But it's paid by the tenant, so it's zero cost on top of the base rental for you as an owner or investor. For the shorter stays, shall we say, but again, I'm sounding like a broken record, not the week in, week out things, please. For the shorter stays, we will typically charge a rate of 20%. But again, part of that will accrue and come back to the HOA or the condominium as a whole. So that's, that's important to emphasize. And then will we and just to compare to the market, you will find in the market that the costs for people to do that, so to manage, are anywhere between 15 and 30. So we don't think we're lowest, we don't think we're the highest, but certainly very much on the lower end of a high-end quality resort. If you took the same resort anywhere in the Algarve, and you found and you looked at that, 30% would be easily chargeable by any sort of on-site management company here. Now, if everybody, or if not everybody, if the majority, whatever the rules of the condominium are, the majority of the people say, well, actually what we'd like to do is we'd like to increase that charge a little bit, because we'd like more revenue to accrue to the condominium, we would be open to discussing that without, what we can't do is make it, we want this to be a good, viable investment for investors. And so we think these are very fair terms on which to operate, and investors will get great returns by Portuguese standards, certainly not if you invest in the Philippines or something, but by Portuguese standards. And so we think this is a solid response. Will I be able to rent one or both of the garage parking spaces assigned to my unit? If so, will Luz Living assist within this rental process? Really interesting question. And the answer is yes and yes. But I've talked to you already about the fact that parking is at a premium in Luz, and closed secure parking even more of a rarity, which is why in the cost of each apartment, we've sort of stripped out or broken out the approximate value of the parking spaces associated with each one. Now, the condominium will want, of course, given the fact that the parking, while secure, nonetheless represents a sort of shared space between owners, the condominium and the owner will want a say in the vetting of potential parking renters to ensure, for example, that no one's running a business from their parking space or handling deliveries constantly in and out of there. So we will build in, but very valid question, we will build in the vetting of parking tenants, and that will, we think, that will not be allowed to be done exclusively by the owner. There will be a portion or a part of that due diligence of the tenant of the garage space, assuming it's not someone who is a resident of the apartment, of course, because then they have the right to the use of the garage space. But if it's not, and if it's just a garage space, for example, there's some apartments that have 3 garage spaces, and if you want to rent 2, we will go and find the renters, but we insist that on behalf of the condominium has a say in terms of the due diligence of the tenant for the garage space. Okay, so we have now reached 40 questions, and I am stopping the pre-set questions. These are the ones we managed to get to. We've seen a few people drop off, but we've been here for quite some time already, so 2.5 hours. So I'm now going to try to go quickly through the Q&A and the chat in this what do you call it, in the webinar, and then I'm going to answer those if I can. So I'm going to read them out first. So, in buying standalone properties, I've heard stories of properties being offered for sale, and then, due to the inheritance rules in Portugal, unknown heirs to the property showing up to contest the sale. Is there such thing equivalent to title insurance as maybe in the US? Or how can one ensure that a potential purchase is indeed clean for sale? Right. So this is a generic question. So this is from Mary. Mary, if you're not interested in Luz Living, and this is a more generic question, something else, please can you remind me again and send me an email on this, because there's an easy answer to this. The title is easy to find. In the case of Luz Living, Quality Living Algarve Limitada, which owns Luz Living, has the title completely unencumbered. We bought this from the bank. We went through administrator at the time at the bank. It was accepted by the various banks with the title of transition to us. It's clear of any encumbrance, and that can be checked. So we own this title clear and unencumbered. All right. Hopefully that answers that one. Peter, my wife and I are Canadians. Welcome. We have several Canadians. I also have EU citizenship. Yes. How is residency requirement applied in the situation? You, Peter, are a lucky chap. Because you will simply ignore, for the purposes of residency, your Canadian citizenship. You will use your EU citizenship, which gives you free and unencumbered, untrammeled right to settle anywhere in the EU, including Portugal. And if your spouse, for example, because you don't mention her in the specific point about her being an EU citizen, if she is not an EU citizen, she can be joined to you via process, without in any way implying any sort of dependency other than the residency one. She can be joined to you via a process called reagrupamento familiar, family regrouping. Okay, and this can happen with any spouse or any partner, even with a partner, in a civil partnership. As long as you can prove the civil partnership, the main applicant, who can be the wife, the husband, whichever the partners, doesn't matter. The one that has the EU citizenship has the free right to settle. The other partner and any family that may also be affected by this can be aggregated to the main applicant. So in your case, Luz Living is an excellent solution, obviously, just from that perspective, because you, for example, do not need the golden visa. You do not need the D7, okay? And even if you wanted to move to Portugal beforehand, before, for example, Luz Living being completed, you could rent somewhere, wherever you chose, at whatever price, and then you could choose to buy in Luz Living at whatever price, and you could just rent, for example, if you were or during the period during which Luz Living was being built. So that applies. I'm giving you that answer to you, Peter, but it clearly would apply to other situations or to other people as well. Ken, the best time of the year to travel to Portugal, the warmest season. So I am assuming that these are two separate questions, because the warmest season is not the best time to travel to Portugal if you are looking to validate whether Portugal is a good destination for you. The worst time is the best time to travel. In other words, what do I mean by that antithesis? And I mean, you should never visit a country, especially if you're visiting it for the first time, where you see it in all its resplendent glory. Sunshine every day, 35-degree temperatures, nary a drop of water in sight, whatever, you get the picture. That is not the reality all year round. You want some rainy days. You want some cold nights. You want some quiet periods. You want to understand whether or not the village of Luz is too quiet for you in the winter, or it's just quiet enough. And actually, you're going to be one of those people running away in the summer. So we would recommend either visiting in the winter to get that winter blast, shall we say, which is, it's not Arctic weather, of course, but it's cold by Portuguese standards in the winter than it is. So January, February, that sort of time frame. Or visit in the shoulder season, because you're far from the madding crowds. Wonderful, wonderful weather. Probably the kind of, if I was selling any country in Southern Europe, I would say come in September, October, or maybe come in May. You will be charmed by the country. I don't need to say anything. No one needs to say anything. You're just there. The country will do its work. The weather will do its work. So if you want to be charmed by everything in the country, probably the shoulder season. If you want to do some real hard thinking about the decision, take in some winter months, so you have a chance of getting, getting some bad weather. Okay. The warmest season is, of course, July and August. Of the year. Wilson, the kitchen looks pretty small, but where's the fridge located? I don't see any fridge in the kitchen. It's probably a built-in fridge. When I say probably, it is. It's a built-in fridge. Is the kitchen small? That's a good point. It's not small. We actually, if anything, I would say the smallest bit I'm kind of very direct guy in this sense. I don't mind saying it, because you find out anyway, and that's the way we are. The bedrooms are slightly, some of the bedrooms, the second bedroom is slightly on the small side. But I would like to make a point now that you've brought this out, and I'll come back to the kitchen. The first bedroom, or the only bedroom in the one bedroom unit, as well as the bathroom, are fully accessible. They are defined regardless of their size as fully accessible. So we have designed it so that the turning circle for someone in a wheelchair is catered for in the hall. Now, we don't have anyone at the moment, thankfully, because in terms of health reasons, that is in a wheelchair, but we have catered for this. So that requires actually more space in terms of circulation than would normally be the case. So sometimes the spaces are deceptive. but they've been designed optimally to make this and all the properties fully accessible. Coming back to the kitchen, we do have the option at cost paid by you, the owner, of actually closing off the kitchen. But we took a poll on this from our shareholders and some of the early stage investors and the like. We actually polled where they would prefer an open plan kitchen or a closed kitchen, and the majority was just on the side of the open plan. So we've designed it all as open plan, but there is the ability, I couldn't tell you now if in all the units, but in many of them, to actually put in a wall and make the kitchen closed. There would be an extra cost, but it's not expensive, a couple of thousand, I believe it is from memory, and we could do that. It would obviously it would change the flow of your apartment and would make the living area appear smaller. But I say this because the kitchen actually is not that small at all. Actually, it's just probably the image that appears that way. The next one, EJ. Is the HOA fees added monthly or annually? If there is, how much? I think I've answered that. I've covered the HOA fees. They normally are paid quarterly, just in terms of the actual mechanism. In most developments, they paid quarterly. I never remember in advance or in arrears. I think we would implement, just for safety perspective, we would implement that in advance by quarter, which means you're just paying the 3 months in advance. High versus low season. High season typically is between middle of June, middle of September. Ken, I will come to you in a second. You raised your hand, but maybe if you put it in the chat. The high season, middle of September, middle of June to middle of September. Shoulder season from Easter to that middle of June, and probably an extra month after September into October. Winter season, November to April-ish. This moves a little bit depending on when Easter is. That doesn't mean that sometimes we don't apply winter rates all the way through to May. It just depends on what sort of rental we're working with. That's sort of the general general answer. There will be several nuances to this. The general approach to a condominium such as Luz Living will be that because of its premium status, our peak season will be longer than normal. We certainly do not expect to see a sort of a huge discount between, let's say, June and May in a place like Luz Living. So someone, we wouldn't accept someone trying to be clever and saying, oh, I'm in May now, so I'm going to get a really low price, kind of the same as February in Luz Living. That's just not going to happen given the premium status of the product. If you were looking at maybe a country cottage, that is simple, rustic in nature. Nothing wrong with country cottages, by the way. We have great demand for them, but that's different. It doesn't command the sort of premium. The kind of person that wants the countryside location may not change that dramatically from one season to another. So there may be more of a morph and a longer winter. Here you would see probably a longer summer than the winter, or go for the annual, because that's a way of locking out the risk. Eliminating the risk for the tenant and eliminating the risk for you as an owner. I see a couple more questions from Ken as well, so I'm going to respond to those, and then if I still haven't answered them, you can just put your hand up again. Let's have a look. So condo fees involved, I'll answer that. Does that include all amenities? Yes, that's really important. There's no use having a condo fee and then saying, oh, the pool is excluded or this excluded or whatever. No, we are going to work this out so that residents have access to anything on site. We don't want to be sort of a members club. What you may have to, as residents decide at a future point, is, do you want, and I'm assuming the answer will be no for most, but because it's going to be no initially, do you want to turn some of those amenities into sort of I would say almost publicly available, like via a club? So there are very few internal pools of the quality of this one at Luz Living. So do you want to generate income for the condominium by for people being able to book to go to the pool and the spa and pay a kind of a one-off use or membership fee? We're not considering that. This is for owners and residents. But other than that, we are not, intending to open that up. But if the majority of owners and investors wish to do so, we'll talk about it. Okay. But it definitely includes all the amenities. Obviously, if you have, for example, if you bring in, if you want to have a pedicure done, you can use the room. We'll have a booking thing for one of the treatment rooms down on the garden level. The pedicure is not free. You're going to have to pay the person that's coming doing the pedicure, but the use of the room subject to the rules of booking, and you may have to pay a little service charge to make sure that the cleaning team then goes and we've got people now calling us so forgive them, I have to knock them off. There may be a service charge because there may be additional cost of doing a clean before and after to make sure that the safety and the cleanliness is there, and that's something specific for you. But this will be a nominal fee, 10 euros or something that will go to your owner's account or something like that. So the principle is free and total use of the amenities and the facilities for which you're paying in your HOA or condo fees. The tax, I don't know what the EMI will be like on an annual basis. We have done an estimate in that slide that I showed. I couldn't quite understand. There's a question here is the ROF, the return on something on the one bed. So we've done the ROI, so the return on investment, which is based on gross income. You then have to apply the tax on that. But as I've explained, it will depend a little bit on whether you're using the AL or the arrendamento option. But I think that's probably was answered via my return on investment slide. Someone, EJ, you've lost the reservation for the reserving the one bed. EJ, if you'd send me that email again, if I responded to you, but you've lost mine, I will respond to you again. I now have your name. So if you want to reserve that, just write it to me again. And if you do reserve it, then for everyone else listening, there will only be one bed available after that. The average price for one bed, I think I've answered that because there are only 2 left. Pets policy, yes, we will allow pets. Now, we don't have a fully fleshed out pets policy, I admit, but we do have a sensible initial policy, which is we're not going to allow this to become a menagerie, with 17 pets for a person and so on. We will have some rules, which are that pets have to go and do their business in the pet area. And we still have to decide whether or not we charge a small a premium on the HOA for the cleanup of that area to occur via our cleaning staff. We will allow both cats and dogs. We will expect the cats and dogs to respect the rules of good neighborliness, including barking and so on. So I can tell you through the other business, we get thousands, literally thousands of people, or at least hundreds, who tell us they have non-barking dogs, this, whatever. Honestly, we don't want to hear any of it. It's up to each person to make sure that they respect so that they're not creating disturbance for other people. And of course, dogs will bark every once in a while and cats will meow. We think a reasonable policy is probably 2 pets. And then neighborliness will, so we will be looking for input from people who have pets to design the pet policy to make it fair for all. Okay, we obviously have some ideas already, and we've designed this to be a pet-friendly condominium. What I would say is we will not take lightly anyone who allows the dog and cat to wee or do other business, kind of, and killing off the either the grass or the plants. So people will need, especially with cats, that will sort of walk around and you can't sort of control them as much. So we will need to make sure that that's taken into account, because there will be a cost of things such as replacing a bush that has been affected by particularly strong urine or something. And then this sounds like a rather crass thing to be discussing on a webinar, but it's the reality, and this is part of the reality of it. But the demographic with whom we work, people of a certain age, often we have a pet as a companion, whether for a couple or for a person. So we recognize that, and we think it's perfectly reasonable to allow it. And what I would also say is the law in Portugal to allow it in the main. So let's try and find a balance here. Okay, that's what we asked. Let's try and find a balance. September, October would be great. That was just a comment. I think average rent September, March 2022. I think if you mean, Ken, in terms of Luz Living, I have actually got those. Oh, excuse me. I did work those. Excuse me. I did work through those. So I've been talking now for 3 hours. I did work through those in that summary. I just can't see it, the Excel behind it at the moment, but I'll send you those. But just as an example, a 2-bedroom in the winter for a Luz Living apartment, I can't see it being rented less than 1,750 per month, for example, plus utilities. You can see now that may sound expensive because I can rent a villa. I can rent a 3-bed villa for even less than that. But that's what it'll be. That's what we'll be able to request and demand in the current market for that type of product. I think I've answered those ones. Now let me have a look on the chat. So there's some people have asked on the Q&A. So some were just sort of initial hellos. Would you please review pricing again? Oh, would you please review pricing again, 1 and 2 bedroom? Yes, I will. So let me just go up from that. Oh, sorry, wrong one. So I'll just start with the 2 ones. Now, it would appear as though there is someone that has actually shown interest in one of the 1 beds. So it may be that after this call, only one of these is available. But anyway, so the 1 bedrooms are priced at either 275,000 or 299,000. Okay, there's really no other option there. So this is what is available. Sometimes we find that, and this may happen, but I'm not counting on it because I'm not aware of this. Sometimes we may find that someone starts with a 1 bedroom, then upgrades, shall we say, in terms of size to a 2 bedroom. And if that does happen, we've had a couple of people change from top floor because they wanted 2 apartments together. So they bought 2 on the middle floor, and we had 1 person move from a 2 bedroom, whatever. If that happens and something comes available as a result of a change of heart of someone, we will certainly let people know. So if you are interested in a 1 bed, but if we run out of 1 beds, do let us know anyway. And if it's only a 1 bed that you are willing to accept, let us know, because we will put you on a sort of waiting list. And if anything comes up, then we will let you know. Okay, no problem. As regards the 2 bedroom, I don't know if I had a slide just to talk through them briefly. The cheapest 2 bedroom is on the ground floor, and because it doesn't have a sea view, some of them do, the one on the western end, and the one on the eastern end will not, but they have massive terraces. So for example, if you've got a pet, especially a dog, and you don't, and because we won't allow the dogs to just be running around in the communal garden, if you want them to be on a terrace, great for having a dog, because they have, you can put their, their basket out there, or their kennel. They can stay there. They'll have their outside space, which is very close to yours. So that's a use for outside entertainment, for example. You'll be able to do that. You can put the lilos out there or whatever, in addition to the ones near the pool. So the cheapest 2 beds are actually the ones with the largest terraces. Okay, so if anyone's looking for a large terrace, you don't need to pay more. As long as you're happy to sacrifice the sea view, you still have lovely garden views and so on. So no, it's not as though you'll have an ugly view, quite the contrary. But 475 is the starting level there, and I think we have a few of those. We then on the top floor, they start at 575 and they go up to about 625, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to get the prices out. Don't have it in front of me. And those are the ones with this sort of panoramic sea view. And the reason for the higher price on the top floor, the difference between the cheapest on the top floor and the most expensive is actually not. The corner units have a slight premium, but it's because of the number of garages. So I'll come back to that because I've seen a couple of questions about garages, but it's because you're actually paying for more garage, and we have to sell the garage space because it's it cost us to build it, we pay for it because it's considered usable space, and therefore we have to charge for it, and we had to build a minimum number of garages, and therefore we assign the garages to the most, shall we say, expensive units at the top. You know, we could have done it at the bottom, but it would have probably made a little less sense. So the prices of the 2 bedrooms, and if you want to email me about this, please do, and we can send you the one that the information I sent you for the 1 bed with the plans and with the overall floor plan. We do that for everyone who inquires about specific what do you call them, units. We do that. The prices for the 2 beds will be around 475 to around 499, I believe, on the ground floor. About around 550 to 525 to 575 on the first floor, and then 575 to 625 on the top floor. Okay. Now, there's a question here: can a 2-bedroom apartment be purchased with a garage? Not only can it must be purchased with a garage. It's the law in Portugal that you have to assign at least a minimum of 1 garage to each apartment in a condominium such as this. So the minimum number of garages that come with, and it's included in the price. I've just broken it up as you've seen, not on this slide, but on this 1-bed slide. You'll see that I've broken down garage is 17,500 euros. Apartment price is 257, and then the total price is 275. That garage cost, which at the extreme in the most expensive garage is worth, it's a 3 garage, it's worth 62,500 euros. So it's a big chunk of the price of the apartment are the 3 garages. You can then choose the apartment based on how many garages. Just to be clear, you can't mix and match garages anymore, because we've had to do all the electrics and all the plumbing and associated diagrams, and those have been approved by the municipality. What you can do is you can pick a unit which has less garages and just be in a slightly different place, and we'll work through those scenarios with you. On which floor are the 1-bedroom apartments? They're on the garden level, which is the lowest, and only. I suppose today, in hindsight, if we'd redesigned it, we would probably had a mix of 1 beds on different floors. But the reason we did it this way was because we have so much infrastructure, what I call infrastructure or amenities, in the project, that the best way of optimizing the space was to do it in this way, with the 1-bedroom apartments at the garden level. It also meant that the garden level, you know, for a single person was a bit easier in terms of sort of walking in and out. Yeah, it felt a little bit righter to have the one bed there than having some of the 2 bedrooms there. I think this is a repeated question. What are the condo fees, which we've talked about, their estimates, and do they include all the amenities like gym, pool? I think I've talked about that. That's a yes, except if it's something very specific. When will construction be complete and the units be ready to move in? I think I've talked about that as well. Our estimate is the end of 2023. If there's any delay, we don't think it'll be much longer than that, but it will depend on the starting date of the construction. Which we'll know very shortly based on feedback from the main contractor. What happens if the investment unit is not resold or the market turns? Will it be rented and or available for use by the investor on the same 60-40 split? Excellent question. Who asked this question? Jacqueline. Excellent question. The answer is yes, absolutely. And actually, if I may say so, Jacqueline, we don't want to sound as though, I mean, if everyone worked on the investor payment option basis, and we have 30 units that are suddenly investor basis, we will want to encourage the sale of a chunk of those units, because we want to see the return of our capital and some capital for the next project. Okay, so I think that's pretty much, you can take that as a given. But we're actually interested in retaining rental inventory. So, you know, in a normal scenario that we predict, we don't anticipate that there will be pressure, you know, to sell very quickly or to resell. Having said that, once this project is advanced, I mean, it's natural. You are the pioneers in that sense because you're early into the project. We've barely started clearing the site and so on, so that you're having to listen to people like me and believe in the project and do your due diligence and so on. By the time we get to 3/4 built, I mean, the market will be crawling all over this, honestly, and then it will be a question of picking, I would estimate, your buyer. And I would say this. Of course, we can't foresee major world events, but in those major world events, and I just honestly pray that we do not see any additional or aggravation of the current situations and the two sort of main issues that we're dealing with, the war and the pandemic. Even in those circumstances, projects like Luz Living are exactly the kind of, let's call it, destination or solution that people will seek. They will seek safety, privacy in a safe and in a sort of well-managed, cost-efficient kind of environment and country. And so, if anything, projects like Luz Living will come to the surface. As you can imagine, I've been in the real estate market for some time, in addition to a few other things that I've done. But I would not hesitate in saying that this is exactly a crisis-proof type product because of its characteristics and because there isn't much of it available. And there are no other projects like it even the fact that we're taking 2 years. There's nothing else planned of the same type. You may say, well, we were crazy because who wants it? Lots of people. There just haven't been enough people with courage to drag themselves away from the tourism market because they're making enough money in tourism to do this. But there are no other solutions, and this will rise to the surface. I have absolutely no doubt. So that was the long answer. Short answer to your question, Jacqueline, is yes. We will absolutely do it on a 60-40 basis split. I think there was a question here about accident insurance. Normally, everyone has to insure their own, apartment for accident if somebody's staying there, and it's the owner's responsibility. But insurance for this type of situation is actually very inexpensive. You're talking probably in the region of 100 to 200 euros per annum for this sort of thing. Is the underfloor heating just the bathroom of the entire unit? Excellent question, Luby. Entire unit, and 2-bed, 2-bathroom units available? Absolutely. The majority of the units are 2-bedroom, 2 bathrooms. The 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom units only exist because on the ground floor, we had to take one of the bathrooms out to allow for the shaft of the, not for the shaft, for the entrance from the street level, shall we say, not from the street because it's private, but from the street level access, there needs to be an atrium. So on every floor, and there are 6 of these, so 6 of the apartments are 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, because we had to steal a bathroom to get the entrance in. And then we have, so underfloor heating, yes, all over, and this is extremely important in terms of managing the temperature variations in the apartment. Sorry, I was late to join. No problem, Kurt. Are the common areas smoke-free? Absolutely. Absolutely. Obviously, we can't stop people from smoking outside, but we will be implementing some very strict rules in terms of any internal areas that are communal will be smoke-free. This is, I'm not sure if it's a law in Portugal, but it probably is the law in Portugal anyway. And even outside, we will want people to stick strictly to this, almost to apply the same sort of common sense that we have to these days in terms of social distancing to prevent from COVID and things like that. The message from me is really 2 parts. The first is that many of you, I doubt specifically on this call or on this webinar, but this may then go out to other people. Many of you have contacted us about things which are not necessarily only Luz Living specific. Okay, we're happy to provide insight and input and even services, depending on what you're looking for, in a number of other areas. So don't be shy to ask, but equally, I would ask that you try to identify clearly when you contact us what your focus is, rather than just sending it to a Luz Living email with a general request, and we don't quite know how to react. So that's my first request in a general way. The second is with regard to Luz Living. This project, as you can tell, it's not, I mean, of course, it's about the profitability and we have investor options and so on, but it's much more about implementing a concept. And without getting overly sort of emotional or emotive about this thing, because at the end it's brick and mortar real estate. What we want is to identify the, additional, however many it is, 28 or whatever it is, people that we need that will form this Luz Living community, either as residents or as investors. And we really feel that we have designed, through some innovation and experience, a whole range of options to cater for both of those groups. And so what we really want is, you don't have to feel, that you have to take this decision. But if you feel that you want to, please get in touch. And if you feel, for example, that you'd like to, but you're worried about, I don't know, the pricing or the payment terms or whatever, be in touch, because we can talk you through those options. And sometimes it helps, because we may see a solution that you may not have seen. Okay. And always bear in mind, prices in Portugal are going up tremendously. I mean, things are not cheap anymore. We think that this project is still very competitively priced, but it's an investment decision, even if you decide to live in it. So please don't hesitate to ask us about that. We're very conservative, but you'll sense in our responses that we're bullish about what the market will do with this sort of product. So don't hesitate. You've got our contact details. I don't have the names of all the people on this call because it's only first names. So we don't normally go out with many sort of mailings and stuff like that. We're too busy. So we'd like people to respond to us, and then we will go back to the list of people that have contacted us and to whom we have not responded in detail. But if you attended this presentation anyway and you had your questions answered, please be in touch and just give us some feedback. We'd love that, because at least we know where we stand, whether you liked it, didn't like it. I know it was very long, it was almost 3 hours, but this was the objective, answering your questions, and we hope we've done so. So thank you very much, one and all. Stay safe. We hope to see you in Portugal, and more importantly than all, given it's a Luz Living, we hope to see you as an owner, whether it's an owner, resident, or investor of Luz Living. Thank you so much for your time and for your patience, and stay safe. Thank you. Bye-bye now.